The alarm clock read 5:30 a.m. when Captain Jack Hawthorne opened his eyes in the darkness of his quarters at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, Arizona. He had been awake for 20 minutes already, staring at the ceiling, but only now did he allow himself to move. 42 years old, 20 years in uniform. And this morning, for reasons he could not fully articulate, felt different than all the mornings that had come before. The base gym was empty at this hour, which was exactly why Hawk preferred it. The weight room smelled of rubber mats and old sweat, familiar and grounding. He moved through his routine with mechanical precision. Bench press, squats, pull-ups, each rep a meditation, each set a prayer to gods he no longer believed in, but still respected out of habit. His body protested more than it used to. The shoulder he had dislocated in Kandahar in 2011, the knee that had never quite recovered from a hard landing outside Mosul in 2009, the invisible scars that ran deeper than muscle and bone. On the wall above the weight bench hung a photograph, creased and faded, protected by a cheap plastic frame that someone had duct taped to the cinder blocks. 4 young men in desert camouflage, arms slung around each other's shoulders, squinting into an Iraqi sun that felt like it belonged to a different lifetime. Hawk paused between sets, breathing hard, and looked at those faces. Jenkins, Rodriguez, Patterson, O'Brien, all dead. All dead because 18 years ago, in a place called Fallujah, he had hesitated when he should have acted. The memory came unbidden, as it always did. A Black Hawk hovering over a narrow street choked with smoke and rubble. His finger on the trigger. A figure in the window of a building, young, maybe 16 years old, wearing a white dish dasha, hands empty. The voice of his commander in his headset, urgent and hard. Engage all targets. Hawk's moment of doubt. Just a kid. Just some scared kid. The figure disappearing into the building. And then, 10 seconds later, the ambush. Muzzle flashes from that same window. 4 Marines cut down in the street below, their blood mixing with the dust of a city that would forget them before their bodies were cold. Hawk had not pulled the trigger, and 4 men had died because of it. He finished his set, racked the weights with more force than necessary, and walked to the locker room. The mirror showed him a man he barely recognized sometimes. Salt and pepper hair cut military short, a scar bisecting his left eyebrow from a helicopter crash in Afghanistan, lines around his eyes that came from squinting into too many hostile skies. He still wore his wedding ring, though Rachel had left 3 years ago, tired of loving a ghost who could not stop living in the past. Today would be his last flight, his final mission before retirement papers went through. 30 days from now, he would be a civilian. No more uniforms, no more formations, no more war. The thought terrified him more than any enemy fire ever had. The shower was scalding hot. He let it burn. Chief Warrant Officer Miguel Santos was waiting in the officer's mess when Hawk arrived for breakfast. Doc, as everyone called him, sat alone at a corner table reading a paperback novel with a torn cover, a cup of coffee steaming beside him. He was 38 years old, built like a middleweight boxer, with the kind of weathered face that came from growing up hard in East Los Angeles and then spending 15 years in uniform, first as an Army Ranger medic, then as a helicopter pilot. He looked up when Hawk approached, dog-eared his page, and smiled. "You ready for your last dance, old man?" Hawk slid into the seat across from him, set down his tray. Scrambled eggs that looked like yellow rubber. Toast that could double his body armor. Coffee that tasted like it had been brewed with motor oil. Standard military fare. "As ready as I'll ever be." Doc studied him with eyes that missed nothing. "You sleep at all?" "Some. Liar." They ate in comfortable silence. They had flown together for 10 years, long enough that words were often unnecessary. Doc knew about Fallujah, not the official after-action report version, but the real version, the one that woke Hawk up at 3 a.m. drenched in sweat. Doc had his own ghosts, his older brother Carlos, dead at 40 from a fentanyl overdose 3 years ago, another casualty of a different kind of war being waged on American streets. They were both men haunted by failures they could not undo, bound together by the understanding that comes from shared damage. "So what's the plan?" Doc asked. "After you pin on those retirement papers, you gonna finally buy that cabin in Montana, go fishing every day, grow a beard and become one of those crazy mountain men?" Hawk stirred his coffee, watching the oil slick patterns swirl on the surface. "Honestly, I have no idea. The thought of not flying, of not having a mission, it feels like falling. You could instruct. They've been trying to get you to take a teaching slot for 5 years. Maybe, but Doc heard the doubt in his voice. They both knew that teaching was not the same as doing, and Hawk was a man who needed to do, needed the stick in his hands and the turbine whine in his ears, and the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. Without that, who was he? Just another washed-up veteran with too many memories and not enough future. The briefing room at 0700 hours was standard military issue. Folding chairs arranged in neat rows. A projector screen at the front showing the unit insignia. Coffee station in the back and with a pot that had probably been brewing since the Clinton administration. Hawk entered to find his crew already assembled. 4 faces turned toward him as he walked to the front of the room. Staff Sergeant Marcus Stonebridge sat in the front row, back straight, arms crossed over a chest that looked carved from mahogany. 35 years old, former Marine Scout sniper, 3 combat deployments. The kind of man who communicated more with silence than most people did with speeches. He and Hawk had flown together for a decade. Stone was the best door gunner in the unit, capable of hitting targets at ranges that made other shooters shake their heads in disbelief. He had a 17-year-old son who had just enlisted, following in his father's footsteps, and a quiet intensity about him that suggested he had seen things he would never talk about. Beside him sat Sergeant First Class Danny Cole, 28 years old, fresh-faced in a way that made him look even younger. This would be his first real combat evaluation flight after 2 years of training. He sat forward in his chair, practically vibrating with nervous energy, a notebook open on his lap covered in meticulous handwriting. He reminded Hawk of himself 2 decades ago, before Iraq had burned the innocence out of him. In the third row, Corporal Angela Reyes, call sign Reaper, tapped away at a tablet, her dark eyes scanning lines of data that only she could interpret. 26 years old, top 5% of her class at West Point, intelligence specialist with a gift for signals analysis and a personal vendetta against drug cartels. Her father had been a Border Patrol agent who had been murdered by cartel hitmen 5 years ago. She did not talk about it, but Hawk saw it in the way her jaw tightened whenever Mexico was mentioned, the way her fingers curled into fists when the briefings covered drug interdiction operations. And in the back, trying to appear invisible, sat Specialist Ryan Novak, 24 years old, aviation mechanic and backup medic. Pale, thin, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested he survived on coffee and anxiety. He had earned the nickname Lucky after surviving 2 IED blasts in Afghanistan, but Hawk suspected the kid considered himself anything but lucky. He had good hands for fixing helicopters and a gentle touch for treating wounded soldiers. But there was something fragile about him, something that made Hawk want to protect him even as he knew that was not always possible in war. Doc entered behind Hawk, took a seat beside Stone, and the briefing began. Hawk clicked the remote. The projector screen lit up with a satellite image of desert terrain, rust red and bone dry, cut through with dirt roads and scattered rock formations. A compound set in the center of the image, surrounded by chain-link fence gone rusty with age. FIREBASE SERPENT, former DEA forward operating base, 60 miles southwest of Tucson, 5 miles from the Mexican border. Abandoned for the last 5 years after budget cuts. Currently being used as a target site for red flag training exercises. Our mission is simple. Fly reconnaissance over the site, gather imagery for the simulation team, and return to base before 1400 hours. Total flight time, approximately 3 hours. Questions. Danny raised his hand like he was still in high school. Sir, what kind of opposition are we simulating? None. This is pure reconnaissance. We're playing the role of a surveillance asset. No live fire. No opposition force. You could do this flight in your sleep. Stone grunted, which might have been a laugh or might have been skepticism. Hawk knew him well enough to recognize it as both. Reaper looked up from her tablet. Sir, I've been monitoring radio traffic in the area. There's been some unusual chatter on frequencies typically used by cartel smuggling operations. Could be nothing, but protocol says I should flag it. Hawk considered this. Unusual how? Encrypted bursts, short duration, definitely not civilian traffic, but the DEA and Border Patrol both say there are no known operations in that sector right now. Probably just coyotes moving people across the border. That area has been a smuggling route for decades. Noted in your log, but I wouldn't worry. FIREBASE Serpent has been abandoned for years. There's nothing there worth anyone's attention. He believed it when he said it. Later, he would remember this moment, this casual dismissal, and understand that arrogance had nearly killed them all. The briefing continued. Weather conditions, optimal. Clear skies, light winds, temperature expected to peak at 102 degrees Fahrenheit. Flight path, direct route following the interstate corridor before cutting southwest into the desert. Fuel load, standard, weapons. 2 M240B machine guns mounted on the doors, 6 HK-416 rifles secured in the weapons locker, standard sidearms. Just enough to make them feel safe, not enough to save them if things went wrong. Hawk dismissed them with a final instruction. Pre-flight at 0800, wheels up at 0830, and Cole, try not to throw up in my helicopter. Danny flushed red while the others laughed, and for a moment they were just soldiers again, not men carrying the weight of wars that never quite ended. The flight line at Davis-Monthan was a cathedral of American military power. Rows of helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft gleaming in the Arizona sun. The smell of jet fuel and hydraulic fluid, the sound of turbines spooling up, the sight of crews moving with practiced efficiency across the tarmac. Hawk walked toward his Black Hawk with Doc at his side and felt something loosen in his chest. This was home. This had always been home. The Black Hawk sat on the pad like a predator at rest. Sleek, dangerous, beautiful in the way that weapons often are. Olive drab paint scheme with barely visible unit markings. Registration number on the tail boom. 2 M240B machine guns mounted in the door openings, barrels pointed skyward. Hawk ran his hand along the fuselage, feeling the rivets under his palm, and thought about all the missions this bird had flown, all the soldiers it had carried into and out of hell. Stone was already at the portside gun, running through his checks with the focus of a man who trusted his life to machinery and refused to leave anything to chance. Novak crawled around underneath, inspecting hydraulic lines and landing gear struts. Danny stood near the starboard gun, trying to look confident and mostly failing. Reaper had her equipment spread across the cargo deck, satellite uplinks and encrypted radios and tablets showing data streams that Hawk could not begin to understand. Doc climbed into the cockpit, settling into the right seat. Hawk took the left, the pilot's position, and began his own pre-flight ritual. Circuit breakers, flight controls, instruments, every switch in its proper position, every gauge reading nominal. Flying was not about faith. It was about procedures followed precisely, about respecting the aircraft and understanding that the margin between life and death often came down to a single overlooked detail. The turbines whined to life, building to a scream, and then settled into the familiar thump, thump, thump of rotor blades cutting air. Hawk felt it in his chest, that rhythmic pulse, and closed his eyes for just a moment. 20 years of this sound. After today, 30 days of paperwork, and then silence. Tower, this is Raptor 2-4, ready for departure. Raptor 2-4, Tower, you are clear for takeoff. Winds 180 at 5, altimeter 292, fly safe. Hawk pulled pitch, felt the helicopter go light on its skids, and lifted into the morning sky. Below, Davis-Monthan fell away, becoming a pattern of runways and buildings and parked aircraft. Beyond the base, Tucson sprawled across the desert floor, a city that seemed to exist in defiance of logic, humans insisting on living in a place that did everything possible to kill them. And beyond Tucson, the desert itself, vast and ancient and utterly indifferent to the small dramas of men. They flew southwest, following Interstate 19 as it ran toward the border. The landscape below shifted from urban sprawl to scattered towns to empty country, marked only by dirt roads and the occasional ranch house. The sun was already brutal, turning the desert into a shimmering mirror of heat haze. Inside the helicopter, with the doors open, the air was a blast furnace. Stone stood behind his gun, safety harness clipped to the overhead rail, watching the ground pass beneath them with the patient intensity of a hunter. Danny was at the starboard gun, gripping the weapon like it might leap out of his hands, and Hawk could see the kid's jaw working, probably running through everything he had been taught in training. Over the intercom, casual conversation, the kind of talk that soldiers use to pass time and build bonds. Doc's voice, dry and amused. So Stone, your boy ships out for basic next month, right? Stone's rumble, affirmative, Fort Benning, infantry like his old man. You tell him what he's getting into? Told him the army will lie to him, the food will be terrible, and he'll hate every minute until the day he gets out and realizes it was the best time of his life. Doc laughed. Sounds about right. Danny chimed in, tentative. Sir, can I ask you something? Hawk kept his eyes on the horizon. Go ahead, Cole. Have you ever, in combat, have you ever frozen like when it mattered? The question hit harder than Danny could have known. Hawk's hands tightened on the controls. He saw Stone glance toward the cockpit. Saw Doc turn to look at him. They all knew what Danny was really asking. Tell me I won't fail when it counts. Tell me I'll be brave enough. Hawk chose his words carefully. Everyone hesitates, Cole. The difference between a good soldier and a dead one is what you do after that first moment of fear. You follow your training, you trust your team, and you do your job. Understand? Yes, sir. But Hawk heard the doubt in the kid's voice, and he understood it because he had carried that same doubt for 18 years. They flew on. The interstate disappeared behind them, replaced by dirt roads that looked like scars across the landscape. The radio crackled with routine traffic, Border Patrol agents reporting movements, a medevac helicopter transferring a patient from Nogales to Tucson, the comfortable chatter of professionals going about their business. Reaper's voice cut through. Captain, I'm picking up that encrypted traffic again. Stronger now. Definitely military-grade equipment. Someone down there is using frequency-hopping radios. Can you localize? Working on it. But sir, this doesn't feel right. That equipment is not cartel standard. This is professional-grade tactical comms. Hawk exchanged a glance with Doc. Border Patrol doing an operation they didn't tell anyone about? Doc shrugged. Wouldn't be the first time. But something cold was forming in Hawk's gut. Instinct. The same instinct that had kept him alive through 2 decades of flying into places where people tried very hard to kill him. He keyed the radio. Tower Raptor 2-4. Request confirmation on friendly operations in Sector 7 Romeo. A pause. Then the tower's response, static-edged. Raptor 2-4, we show no friendly operations in that sector. Be advised, that area is designated for red flag simulation only. Roger Tower. Continuing mission. But his hand drifted to the weapons panel, checking that the M240S were charged and ready. Just in case. FIREBASE SERPENT appeared on the horizon 15 minutes later. From altitude, it looked like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. Chain link fence sagging between tilted posts. 3 main buildings, concrete block construction. Roofs partially collapsed. A hangar with its door hanging open like a broken jaw. Guard towers empty, their observation decks weathered to gray splinters. Piles of debris scattered across the compound. Desert reclaiming what man had abandoned. Hawk brought the Black Hawk into a slow orbit at 800 feet, standard reconnaissance altitude. Below, nothing moved, just dead buildings baking under a merciless sun. Reaper was on her tablet, cross-referencing satellite imagery. Sir, according to the records, this place was decommissioned in 2020. They were supposed to remove all equipment and supplies, but budget ran out halfway through. There could still be material down there. Stone had his binoculars up, scanning the compound with professional thoroughness. Captain, I've got fresh tire tracks in the sand, multiple vehicles, and that hangar door's open. According to the satellite photos from last month, it was closed. Hawk felt that cold instinct crystallize into certainty. Something was wrong. Doc saw it too. Maybe we should call this in. Get some eyes on the ground before we get too close. Hawk nodded, was reaching for the radio, when Danny's voice cracked over the intercom, high and tight with fear. RPG, port side! Time compressed. Hawk's eyes snapped to the guard tower on the north side of the compound and saw the smoke trail, saw the rocket-propelled grenade streaking toward them, and knew with absolute clarity that he had made a fatal mistake. They were too low, too slow, too exposed. His hands moved on pure instinct. Hard right cyclic, full power. The Black Hawk tilted into a desperate, evasive turn, rotors screaming, and the RPG flashed past their nose, missing by less than 10 feet, the heat of its passage washing through the open doors. But there was a second shooter. There was always a second shooter. The RPG launched from the hangar roof, and Hawk had no time to react. It struck the tail boom with a sound like a sledgehammer hitting sheet metal. The Black Hawk lurched, and every warning light on the panel lit up red. Tail rotor failure, loss of anti-torque control. They were spinning. Hawk's training took over. Instinct and muscle memory built from thousands of hours in the cockpit. He cut engine power, adjusted the collective pitch, tried to convert their altitude into a controlled descent. This was auto-rotation, the emergency procedure every pilot practiced and prayed they would never need. The helicopter became a falling leaf, spinning as it descended, and Hawk fought the controls with everything he had. 800 feet, 600, 400. The ground rushed up to meet them, rock and sand and death. Doc's voice, surprisingly calm. Airspeed 80 knots. Too fast. I know, Hawk's hands moved, trying to slow them, trying to find that perfect balance between controlled descent and uncontrolled crash. I can't slow it down. Rotor's gone. Stone in the back had grabbed Danny and pulled the kid close, one arm wrapped around him like a father protecting a son. Hold on, kid. Just hold on. Reaper was strapped into her seat, eyes closed, lips moving in what might have been prayer, or might have been a final message to her dead father. Novak sat rigid, hands gripping his harness, face pale as paper. 200 feet, 100. Hawk pulled full collective at the last possible moment, trading every bit of remaining rotor energy for lift, trying to cushion the impact. The Black Hawk hit hard, harder than any landing Hawk had ever made. The landing gear collapsed. The fuselage bounced, tilted, rolled onto its side. Metal screamed, glass shattered. The world became noise and violence, in the certain knowledge that this was how he was going to die. And then, stillness. Hawk hung in his harness. The helicopter canted at a 45-degree angle. Blood ran from a cut above his eye, warm and sticky. His ears rang from the impact. Every breath sent pain shooting through his ribs. But he was breathing. He was alive. Sound off. His voice came out as a croak. Who's alive? Doc, beside him, coughing. Alive. Broken rib, maybe two. Moving. Stone from the back, alive. Cole's unconscious but breathing. Reaper, alive. Novak's got a head wound, bad. Hawk unstrapped with shaking hands, dropped down onto what had been the side of the helicopter and was now the floor. Through the shattered windscreen, he could see desert and sky and buildings and movement, figures in tactical gear, carrying rifles, moving toward the crashed helicopter with the purposeful advance of men who knew their targets were wounded. He counted 10, 15, 20, more emerging from the buildings. They were surrounded, and whoever had shot them down was coming to finish the job. Hawk's mind cleared with the crystalline focus that comes from absolute necessity. They were alive, which meant they could still fight. They had weapons, they had training, and they had each other. He turned to his crew, saw them looking at him, waiting for orders, and remembered Fallujah. Remembered hesitation. Remembered 4 Marines dying because he had not acted when action was required. Not again. Never again. Weapons locker now. Stone, Reaper. With me. Doc, stay with Cole and Novak. Get them stable. We've got 2 minutes, maybe less, before they're on top of us. Stone was already moving, kicking open the weapons locker, pulling out HK-416 rifles and magazines. Reaper grabbed her go bag with the communications gear. Hawk took a rifle, charged it, felt the weight of it in his hands. Through the broken windscreen, the figures were closer now. He could see faces. Hispanic men, weathered and hard. Military gear, but not uniforms. AR-15S and M4 carbines. This was not some random gang. These were professionals. Stone handed weapons to everyone who could hold one. Doc took a rifle, checking Cole's pupils even as he loaded a magazine. Novak, dazed and bleeding, accepted a pistol with trembling hands. Hawk grabbed the radio, tried to call for help. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Raptor 2-4 down in grid sector November. Echo 7-7, 6 souls on board, all mobile, under immediate hostile fire. Request QRF and close air support. Static. He tried different frequencies. More static. Radios jammed, Reaper confirmed. Military-grade jamming. We're cut off. Which meant no one was coming. They were alone. Hawk looked at his crew. Saw fear, yes, but also determination. These were soldiers. They knew what was at stake. Listen to me. We are going to get through this. We are going to fight, and we are going to survive, and we are going to get home. I promise you that. But I need every one of you focused. Understood? A chorus of affirmatives, ragged but solid. Defensive positions. Stone, take the M240, set up covering the north approach. Cole, when you wake up, you're on the east. Reaper, west. Novak, south. Doc and I will float. reinforce wherever they hit hardest. Rules of engagement. They shot us down in hostile territory. We are authorized lethal force. Make every round count. We don't know how long we're here. Stone was already setting up the M240B machine gun, bracing it on a rock, feeding the belt. His face was set, emotionless, the face of a man who had done this before and would do it again. Beside him, Danny stirred, groaned, opened his eyes. "Welcome back," Stone said quietly. "You picked a hell of a day to join the party." Hawk crawled to the edge of their defensive position, a shallow depression in the sand surrounded by rocks and scrub. He raised the HK-416, sighted through the optic, and watched the enemy advance. They were 300 meters out now, moving in a loose formation that suggested training, but not discipline. Not soldiers. Something else. Reaper appeared beside him, face set, tablet in one hand, rifle in the other. "Captain, I hacked one of their radios. They're speaking Spanish." "Cartel. And sir, they knew we were coming." One of them just said, quote, "El Serpiente confirms DEEA informant gave us the flight path. Kill all witnesses. Secure the product." The words hit Hawk like a physical blow. Someone had set them up. Someone had known they would be here and had given them to the cartel like a gift. "Who's El Serpiente?" Reaper's face was grim. "The Serpent. I've heard that name before. Raul Vega, major cartel operator, former militant. The intel reports say he trained with insurgents in Iraq before coming back to Mexico. Sir, this wasn't random. This was planned." Hawk's blood ran cold. Iraq. Fallujah. A figure in a window. A boy in a white dish dasha, and 18 years later, that same boy was trying to kill him in an Arizona desert. Stone's voice cut through. "Contact. 300 meters, north approach. 20 hostiles advancing." Hawk pushed the pass down, locked it away. Later, if there was a later. "Engage at 250. Controlled bursts. Make them respect us." Stone settled behind the M240B, his body relaxed, breathing steady. The hostiles closed to 275 meters, 260, 255, 250. Stone fired. The M240B was a beautiful weapon in the hands of someone who knew how to use it. 7.62 millimeter rounds at 600 rounds per minute. Stone fired in controlled bursts, 3 to 5 rounds each, walking his fire across the advancing line. Hawk watched through his optic and saw hostiles drop, saw others dive for cover, saw the confident advance become a panicked scramble for safety. In 30 seconds, Stone had broken their attack. Bodies lay in the sand. The survivors retreated behind rocks and bushes, no longer advancing. "Northern approach suppressed," Stone reported, his voice as calm as if he were ordering lunch. 8 to 10 still mobile, at least 4 down. "Good shooting, hold position." But Hawk knew this was just the opening act. The cartel had numbers, they had time, and somewhere out there El Serpiente was watching, planning, waiting for the moment to strike. The desert sun beat down. The temperature inside their makeshift perimeter was climbing past 110 degrees. Water would become an issue soon. Ammunition, medical supplies. They had crashed with enough for a 3-hour reconnaissance flight, not a sustained firefight. Doc appeared beside Hawk, his face grim. "Cole's awake, concussed but functional. Novak's head wound is bleeding, but I've got it controlled. We're operational, but we're not in good shape. How long can we hold?" Doc looked at the sky, the empty horizon, the hostile position surrounding them. "Depends on how bad they want us. If they're smart, they'll wait for dark and overrun us. If they're stupid, they'll rush now and we'll kill a lot of them before they kill us." "Comforting." "You asked." Danny appeared, moving like a man not quite sure where he was. His face was pale, eyes unfocused, but he held his rifle correctly and his finger was off the trigger. Training taking over where consciousness faltered. "Cole," Hawk said, "you good?" "I think so, sir. What happened?" "We got shot down. Now we're fighting our way out." "You remember how to shoot?" "Yes, sir." "Then get to your position. East approach. If you see hostiles, you put them down. Understand?" Danny swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." Hawk watched the kid move to his position, saw the way his hands shook slightly, saw the fear that Danny was trying so hard to hide. 28 years old. This was supposed to be a training flight. Now he was in a firefight for his life. Hawk had seen soldiers break under less, but Danny took his position, checked his rifle, and settled into cover. Maybe the kid would be all right after all. The second attack came from 2 directions at once. 15 hostiles from the east, 12 from the west, coordinated, professional. Someone down there knew what they were doing. Contact east, Danny called out, and Hawk heard the kid's voice crack slightly. 10 to 15 hostiles, 200 meters, closing fast. Contact west, Reaper added, her voice steady. 12 hostiles using cover, moving tactical. Hawk and Doc moved immediately. Hawk to the west to support Reaper. Doc to the east with Danny. This was what command meant. Being where you were needed most. The HK-416 kicked against Hawk's shoulder as he fired controlled 3-round bursts. Center mass, breathe, squeeze. The fundamentals that every soldier learned and that kept you alive when everything went to hell. Beside him, Reaper was firing with mechanical precision, her face set, eyes cold. This was personal for her. Every hostile she put down was another payment on the debt she owed her murdered father. On the eastern perimeter, Danny was firing too fast, burning through ammunition, most of his rounds going wide. Doc grabbed his shoulder. Breathe, Cole. Aim, then fire. Controlled bursts. Danny nodded, tried to slow down, and his next burst hit a hostile who had been using a rock for cover. The man went down hard. Danny stared, frozen, and Hawk saw the moment the kid realized he had just killed someone. Cole, Hawk shouted. Focus. There'll be time to process later. Right now, keep shooting. Danny blinked, nodded, and kept firing. The firefight lasted 10 minutes that felt like hours. Stone's M240B hammered away on the northern perimeter, keeping that approach locked down. Hawk and Reaper held the west, Doc and Danny the east. Novak, despite his head injury, managed to watch the southern approach, though mercifully no one attacked from that direction. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the attack ended. The hostiles pulled back, leaving bodies in the sand, retreating to positions beyond effective rifle range. Cease fire, Hawk ordered. Conserve ammunition. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of heavy breathing and the metallic ping of cooling weapons. Hawk did a quick assessment. His team was alive, shaken, bleeding in some cases, but alive. Status report. Stone. North suppressed. 400 rounds remaining for the M240. Danny, voice shaking. East clear, down to 6 magazines. Reaper. West holding. 4 magazines. Novak. South clear. Full load. They never came at me. Doc appeared beside Hawk, medical bag in hand. We need to talk about ammunition. At this rate, we've got enough for maybe one more engagement. After that, we're down to pistols and harsh language. Hawk checked his watch. They had been on the ground for 40 minutes. Command would not expect them back for another 2 hours. Even if someone realized they were missing immediately, a quick reaction force would take at least 90 minutes to spin up and fly out. They were alone for at least another hour, maybe longer if the jamming was keeping their crash site hidden. Hawk looked at FIREBASE SERPENT 400 meters to the east. Buildings, cover, resources, and whatever product the hostiles had mentioned. The thing they were protecting. An idea formed. Dangerous, probably insane. But sitting here waiting to be overrun was not a plan. He gathered his team. Stone, Reaper, Doc, Danny, even Novak. Pale and unsteady but determined. Listen up. We can't stay here. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. But FIREBASE SERPENT is right there. If we can get inside, we might find a working radio. Maybe supplies. Maybe leverage. Stone considered this. Long shot, Captain. Everything about today has been a long shot. But I'd rather die trying than die waiting. What do you all think? He saw the calculation in their eyes, the fear, but also the trust. They believed in him, and that was both humbling and terrifying. Reaper spoke first. I'm in. If we can get to their communications, I can break their encryption, figure out what they're guarding. Stone nodded slowly. Someone's got to stay with Novak. He can't make a movement like that with a head injury. Doctor, I'll stay. Set up here, provide overwatch. You get in trouble, I'll give you covering fire. Danny looked like he wanted to argue, wanted to stay where it was relatively safe, but he straightened his back. I'm with you, sir. Hawk felt something loosen in his chest. This crew, these soldiers, they were battered and afraid, but they were still a team, still fighting. All right, we move in 20 minutes. Use the time to redistribute ammunition, hydrate, prepare. This is going to get worse before it gets better. But we're going to get through it. Together. They prepared in silence. Stone stripped ammunition from the M240B to top off magazines. Reaper packed her electronics into an assault pack. Danny checked his rifle 3 times, hands still shaking slightly. Novak sat with his back against a rock, Doc beside him, both men quiet. Hawk stood apart, looking toward FIREBASE SERPENT, and thought about Fallujah, about hesitation, about a boy in a window who had become a man called El Serpiente. 18 years he had carried the weight of that moment, 18 years of guilt and second-guessing. Not today. Today he would not hesitate. Today he would lead, and he would bring his people home, or he would die trying. The sun climbed higher, the temperature became brutal, and in the distance, just barely audible over the desert wind, came the sound of engines. Vehicles approaching, more hostiles arriving. "Time to move," Hawk said. Stone checked his rifle one last time. Danny wiped sweat from his eyes. Reaper slung her pack. They moved out into the desert, 4 soldiers against an unknown number of enemies, walking into the Serpent's lair with nothing but weapons and will. Behind them, Doc settled into position with Novak, scanning through his rifle optic, ready to provide whatever support he could. And in the ruins of FIREBASE SERPENT, unseen watchers noted their approach and prepared their response. The war had just begun. The desert between their crash site and FIREBASE SERPENT stretched 400 meters, but it might as well have been 4 miles. Open ground, no cover except scattered creosote bushes and rocks that would not stop a rifle round. The kind of terrain that got soldiers killed in training exercises, let alone real combat. Hawk moved in a low crouch, rifle up, eyes scanning for movement. Behind him, Stone moved like a ghost despite his size, each footfall deliberate and silent. Reaper came third, her smaller frame allowing her to use terrain features that the men had to move around. Danny brought up the rear, trying to mirror Stone's movements and mostly succeeding. The sun was directly overhead now, turning the desert into a convection oven. Heat waves rose from the sand in shimmering curtains that distorted distance and made targets dance. Sweat soaked through Hawk's uniform, stinging his eyes, making his grip on the rifle slippery. He could feel his heartbeat in his temples, steady and strong, the rhythm of a man who had done this before and survived. They covered the first 100 meters without incident. Hawk held up a fist and they froze, becoming part of the landscape. He scanned FIREBASE SERPENT through his rifle optic. The compound was quiet, too quiet. The hostiles had pulled back after the firefight, but that did not mean they were gone. More likely they were regrouping, planning their next move, waiting for orders from whoever was in command. El Serpiente, Raul Vega, the name echoed in Hawk's mind like a ghost from a past he had tried to bury. 18 years since Fallujah. 18 years since a moment of hesitation had killed 4 Marines and created a monster. And now that monster was here, in an Arizona desert, hunting him. The universe had a twisted sense of irony. Stone Low crawled forward until he was beside Hawk, pressed his face close enough that Hawk could smell gun oil and sweat. "Captain, we've got eyes on us. Guard tower northwest corner, single observer with binoculars." Hawk shifted his aim, found the tower. A figure stood in the observation deck, half hidden by the rusted railing, watching their position through field glasses. Range, approximately 300 meters. A difficult shot with a rifle, but not impossible for someone like Stone. "Can you take him?" Stone studied the target for 3 long seconds. "Wind's tricky, heat distortion. But yeah, I can take him. Question is whether we want to announce ourselves." Hawk weighed the options. Leave the observer in place and risk him calling down fire on their position. Take the shot and alert everyone in the compound that they were coming. Neither option was good. Take the shot, quiet as possible, single round. Stone nodded, shifted position slightly, adjusted his breathing. The HK-416 was not a sniper rifle, but in the hands of a former Marine Scout sniper, it was close enough. He settled, his body going still in that way that only true marksmen achieved, where the heartbeat slowed and the breath steadied and the world narrowed to the reticle and the target. 1 breath, 2, on the exhale, Stone fired. The suppressor on the rifle muffled the report to a sharp crack instead of a boom. 300 meters away, the observer jerked, dropped his binoculars, and collapsed. Stone did not wait to confirm the kill. He was already moving, flowing forward like water, because a good shooter knew that the first rule after taking a shot was to relocate. They covered another 100 meters before the alarm went up. Voices shouting in Spanish, the sound of boots on concrete, engines starting. The compound had realized something was wrong. "Double time," Hawk ordered. "We're blown." They ran. Not the panicked sprint of frightened soldiers, but the controlled tactical advance of professionals who knew how to move fast without losing cohesion. The perimeter fence loomed ahead, chain link with razor wire that had gone rusty and slack with age. Stone hit it first, using wire cutters from his kit to open a gap large enough to crawl through. One by one, they slipped into the compound, into the Serpent's mouth. The compound interior was a maze of buildings and debris. Rusted fuel drums, collapsed storage sheds, a motor pool with vehicles that had not moved in years, their tires flat and rotted, windshields opaque with dust. Hawk led them toward the largest structure, the main hangar, moving from cover to cover, always watching, always listening. Behind them at the crash site, Doc's rifle cracked twice, covering fire, keeping the hostiles focused on the decoy position while the real infiltration happened elsewhere. Good man. Hawk made a mental note to buy Doc a bottle of his favorite tequila when they got back. If they got back. The hangar door stood half open, revealing darkness within. Hawk paused at the threshold, let his eyes adjust, then moved inside with his rifle up and ready. The interior was vast and echoing, sunlight streaming through holes in the roof, creating pillars of dusty gold. And in the center, stacked on wooden pallets, were the containers. Military green, reinforced steel, DEA markings stenciled on the sides. 2 containers, each roughly the size of a shipping crate. Padlocks hung from the hasps, but the locks had been cut, the doors left slightly ajar. Reaper moved to the nearest container, pulled the door open, and went still. Captain, you need to see this. Hawk joined her. Inside the container, packed in neat rows, were bricks wrapped in clear plastic. Hundreds of them, each brick marked with a stamp he recognized from DEA intelligence briefings. A serpent coiled around a skull. Fentanyl, Reaper said quietly. That's got to be 200 kilograms, maybe more. Street value in the tens of millions. Enough to kill half the population of Arizona if it hit the streets. Hawk felt something cold settle in his gut. This was not just a cartel smuggling operation. This was major. This was the kind of score that organizations went to war over, and someone inside the DEA had told the cartel where to find it. Stone was already moving to the second container. This one held weapons, M4 carbines still in their factory cosmoline, a T4 rocket launchers, cases of ammunition, fragmentation grenades, even blocks of C4 explosive with detonators still attached. This was not street-level contraband. This was military hardware. How the hell did the cartel get their hands on DEA seizure inventory? Danny asked, his voice tight with disbelief. Someone told them where it was, Hawk said. Someone gave them access, and then made sure no one would be watching when they came to collect. Reaper was already setting up her equipment in the corner of the hangar, pulling out a portable satellite uplink and a ruggedized laptop. Give me 5 minutes. If there's any electronic footprint in this facility, I'll find it. Stone positioned himself near the door, rifle ready, watching their 6. Danny stood beside Hawk, staring at the drugs and weapons with the kind of horror that came from understanding what they represented. Not just crime, but death on an industrial scale. My cousin, Danny said quietly, overdosed on fentanyl 2 years ago. He was 23. They found him in his apartment, dead for 3 days before anyone noticed. This is what killed him. Hawk put a hand on the kid's shoulder. Then we make sure it doesn't kill anyone else. Reaper's fingers flew across her keyboard, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. I'm into the facility's old security network. They didn't wipe the servers when they abandoned this place. I've got access to building schematics, old DEA operation logs, and she paused, her face going pale. Oh God. What? There's an active network node in this building. Someone set up a local area network using the old DEA infrastructure. I can see their files. Captain, these people have been planning this for months. Supply routes, distribution networks, payment schedules. And she looked up, her eyes hard, communication logs with someone inside the DEA. Someone with administrative access to seizure tracking databases. Can you identify them? Reaper's fingers moved. Maybe. Give me 2 more minutes. Stone's voice cut through. Captain, we got company. Multiple vehicles inbound from the east. I count at least 6 technical trucks. Probably 30 to 40 hostiles. Hawk moved to the door, looked out. Dust plumes rose from the desert, vehicles approaching fast. They were out of time. Reaper, whatever you've got, grab it now. We're leaving. But Reaper was staring at her screen, frozen. Captain, the contact inside the DEA. His name is Agent Marcus Cordova. And according to these logs, he's the one who gave the cartel your flight plan. He's the reason we got shot down. The name meant nothing to Hawk, but the implication was clear. They had been betrayed, sold out, left to die so that a corrupt agent could profit from drugs and weapons. Download everything you can. We need proof. Already done. Reaper yanked a thumb drive from her laptop, shoved it into a pocket. But Captain, there's something else. These communication logs mention someone called El Serpiente, and there's a video file, a briefing. I think it's him. Show me. Reaper pulled up the file, hit play. The screen filled with the image of a man standing in what looked like a command tent, Hispanic, maybe 40 years old, lean and hard, with a scar running down his left cheek. He wore tactical gear but no uniform, and when he spoke, his English was perfect, accent-free. The operation proceeds as planned, the man said to someone off camera. The DEA informant has provided the helicopter's flight path. We will eliminate the crew and secure the shipment before the Americans realize what has happened. Once we have moved the product across the border, we will be untouchable. The SERPENT organization will control the entire Southwest pipeline. The video ended. Hawk stared at the frozen image on the screen and felt 18 years collapse into a single moment of recognition. The face had aged. The scar was new, but the eyes were the same. Cold, calculating. The eyes of a boy who had stood in a Fallujah window while Hawk's finger hesitated on the trigger. Raul Vega, El Serpiente. The boy he had not killed had become the man trying to kill him. Captain! Reaper's voice seemed to come from far away. Are you all right? Hawk forced himself to breathe, to think, to function. He shoved the past down where it belonged and focused on the present, on the mission, on his people. I know him. From Iraq, 18 years ago. I had him in my sights and I didn't take the shot. 4 Marines died because of it. The hangar was silent. Stone, Danny, and Reaper stared at him with expressions that mixed shock and understanding. And now he's here, Hawk continued. Now he's trying to flood American streets with poison, and I'm the only one standing between him and that goal. Funny how the universe works. Sir, Danny said carefully, that wasn't your fault. You couldn't have known. Couldn't I? Hawk's voice was harder than he intended. I was a pilot. My job was to identify and eliminate threats. I saw a potential threat, and I hesitated. That hesitation killed good men, and it created this. He gestured at the drugs, the weapons, the compound full of cartel soldiers. Stone stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. Captain, with all due respect, that's horseshit. You made a decision based on the information you had. The kid in that window could have been a civilian. You didn't know he was enemy. And even if you had taken that shot, even if you'd killed a 16-year-old kid, you think that would have changed anything? The cartels would still exist. Fentanyl would still be killing Americans. All that would be different is you'd be carrying a different kind of guilt. Hawk looked at Stone, saw the conviction in the man's eyes, and felt something ease slightly in his chest. Maybe. Or maybe I could have saved 4 lives. Or maybe you'd have taken an innocent life and broken yourself for nothing. Stone's jaw was set. Sir, I've known you for 10 years. You're the best pilot and the best leader I've ever served under. Whatever happened in Fallujah, it doesn't change who you are now. And right now, your crew needs you focused on getting us out of this alive. So with all due respect, sir, put the past away and lead us. It was the longest speech Hawk had ever heard Stone make, and every word hit like a hammer. He was right. The past could not be changed. But the present, the next few hours, the lives of his crew, those were still in play. Those he could still save. You're right. Hawk straightened, felt the weight of command settle back onto his shoulders where it belonged. Thank you, Stone, all of you. Now let's figure out how to get out of here alive. Reaper was already packing her equipment. If we can get to the old DEA communications tower on the north side of the compound, I might be able to bypass the jamming and get a message out. Let command know we're alive and that we've got proof of the DEA corruption. How long would that take? 3 minutes to set up, maybe 5 to break through the jamming, 10 if they're using military-grade countermeasures. Stone checked his rifle. Captain, those vehicles are 2 minutes out. We don't have 10 minutes. Then we make 10 minutes. Hawk turned to Danny. Cole, you're going to take these. He pulled 2 blocks of C4 from the weapons container, along with detonators and a timer. You're going to place these charges on the fuel depot we passed on the way in. Set them for 10-minute delay. When they blow, it'll create enough chaos to cover us while Reaper does her thing. Danny took the explosives with shaking hands. Sir, I've never done demolitions outside of training. Then today you learn. It's just like training, except if you screw up, we all die. No pressure. Danny's laugh was half hysterical, but he nodded. Yes, sir. Stone, you and I are going to provide security while they work. Anyone who gets close to that communications tower dies. Understood? Understood. They moved out, leaving the hangar through a side door, moving in a tactical column with Stone on point and Hawk bringing up the rear. The compound was coming alive around them now, shouts in Spanish, engines revving, the mechanical clack of weapons being charged. The cartel was mobilizing, and they were in the middle of enemy territory with no backup and no extraction plan. Just another day in paradise. The fuel depot sat in the southeast corner of the compound. 3 large tanks connected by pipes, probably holding thousands of gallons of diesel and gasoline. Danny approached them with the C4, moving carefully, and began placing charges. His hands shook, but his movements were precise, following the training that had been drilled into him. Hawk watched with approval. The kid was scared, but he was functioning. That was all anyone could ask. 2 minutes, Danny called out. Charges set. Timer armed. Good. Fall back to the communications tower. Move. They ran in a crouch, using buildings and debris for cover, the way infantry had moved through hostile territory since the invention of gunpowder. The communications tower rose from the north side of the compound like a skeletal finger pointing at the sky. 50 feet of rusted steel with a small equipment shed at its base. Reaper was already at the shed door, working the lock with picks from her kit. The first cartel truck came around the corner of the main building, 50 meters away. A Toyota pickup with a heavy machine gun mounted in the bed, 3 men visible, scanning for targets. Contact! Stone barked and opened fire. His burst caught the driver through the windshield. The truck swerved, crashed into a concrete barrier, and the gunner in the back was thrown clear. Stone put 2 rounds into him before he could stand. The third cartel fighter bailed out of the passenger side, ran for cover, and Hawk took him with a single shot that he felt rather than saw. More trucks were coming. Hawk could hear them, engines screaming, multiple vehicles converging on their position. Reaper, how long? I'm in. Setting up the satellite uplink now. Give me 5 minutes. We don't have 5 minutes. Then give me 3 and pray it's enough. Stone and Hawk took defensive positions on either side of the equipment shed, using the brick walls for cover. More cartel fighters were appearing, moving with the confidence of men who knew they had superior numbers. Hawk counted 10, 15, 20, all armed with military-grade weapons, all moving to surround the communications tower. And then, from the southeast, a massive explosion. The fuel depot erupted in a fireball that rose 200 feet into the air, an expanding sphere of orange flame and black smoke that turned afternoon into artificial twilight. The shockwave hit seconds later, a wall of pressure that rattled teeth and made ears ring. Danny's charges had worked perfectly. The advancing cartel fighters stopped, turned toward the explosion, confusion breaking their formation. Some ran toward the fire, others held position, torn between threats. It was the distraction they needed. Stone poured fire into the confused ranks, dropping 3 men in as many seconds. Hawk added his rifle to the barrage, controlled bursts that found targets even through the smoke and chaos. Danny joined in from the far side of the shed, his earlier hesitation gone, replaced by the mechanical efficiency of survival. I'm through, Reaper shouted. Transmitting now. Mayday signal and data dump going out on all military frequencies. The radio on Hawk's belt crackled to life. Broken, static-filled, but audible. This is U.S. Border Patrol Station, November 7. We copy your Mayday. What is your status? Relief flooded through Hawk so intense it almost hurt. 6 souls, all mobile, under heavy fire at FIREBASE SERPENT. We have confirmed cartel presence and evidence of DEA corruption. Request immediate QRF and air support. Copy your traffic. Stand by for relay to command. And then the radio died again, the jamming reasserting itself. But it was enough. Someone knew they were alive. Help was coming. The question was whether help would arrive in time. A technical truck came screaming around the corner, its mounted machine gun already firing. Heavy caliber rounds chewed through the brick wall of the equipment shed, turning their cover into a death trap. Stone rolled left, came up firing, put a burst into the truck's engine block. The vehicle died, but the gunner kept firing, sweeping the area with devastating effect. "We need to move," Stone shouted. "This position is compromised." "Where?" Hawk fired back, saw his rounds spark off the truck's armor plating. "We're surrounded." "Then we go through them." It was insane, suicidal, and probably their only option. "Reaper, pack it up. We're breaching east." "Danny, you're with me." "Stone, rear guard. We're going to punch through their line and head for the hangar. Once we're there, we hold until QRF arrives." "If QRF arrives." When they arrive." Hawk loaded a fresh magazine, his last full one. "We're not dying today. Not here, not like this." Stone grinned, fierce and wild. "Damn right, Captain. Let's make some noise." They moved as a unit, a 4-person assault team doing something that no tactical manual would ever recommend. Hawk led, firing as he advanced, not aiming, just putting rounds downrange to force the enemy to keep their heads down. Danny was on his right flank, mimicking his movements. Stone and Reaper brought up the rear, walking backwards, maintaining fire discipline, covering their 6. Cartel fighters scattered before them. Surprised by the aggression, by the sheer audacity of 4 Americans charging into 50 armed men, Hawk dropped 2 targets. Danny got 1. Stone's rifle barked in controlled bursts, and men felt like they were being harvested. They made it 20 meters before the return fire began in earnest. Rounds cracked past Hawk's head, so close he felt the supersonic passage, the air displacement. A ricochet sparked off the ground near his foot. Danny grunted, staggered, and Hawk's heart stopped. But the kid kept moving, kept firing, just a graze or the adrenaline blocking the pain. The hangar loomed ahead, 30 meters, 20. The massive sliding door stood partially open, darkness beyond promising cover and concealment. "Almost there, keep moving." And then a new sound cut through the chaos, the distinctive thump of rotor blades. Heavy, powerful, the sound of military-grade helicopters. Hawk's head snapped up, searching the sky, hope and dread warring in his chest. 2 aircraft appeared over the ridgeline, low and fast. Attack helicopters. Not American, the profile was wrong. Chinese export models. Z-10S. The kind of hardware that should not exist in North America, but did anyway, because money could buy anything and cartels had money to burn. The helicopters banked, circling the compound like sharks scenting blood. Weapon pods rotated, tracking. Hawk knew what was coming, knew they had seconds at most. Hangar. Now run. They sprinted. All pretense of tactical movement abandoned. Just 4 people running for their lives while death circled overhead. Hawk felt his lungs burning, felt his legs screaming, felt time stretching and compressing in that strange way it did when survival was measured in heartbeats. 10 meters, 5. They dove through the hangar door as the first helicopter opened fire. The 23mm cannon was designed to destroy light armor. Against human targets, it was overkill to the point of obscenity. The rounds chewed through the spot where they had been standing, turning sand and concrete into a spray of shrapnel. Hawk hit the ground inside the hangar, rolled, came up scanning for threats. His crew was with him, Danny bleeding from a graze on his arm but functional. Reaper checking her equipment, Stone already moving to a defensive position. They were alive, for now. The helicopters continued their circle, one breaking off to engage something in the distance. Probably Doc and Novak at the crash site. Hawk felt his stomach clench. Doc was good, but not good enough to fight off attack helicopters with a rifle. "Captain," Reaper said, her voice tight. "The helicopters. We can't survive a gun run from those." "I know. Then what do we do?" Hawk looked around the hangar, saw the containers of drugs and weapons, saw the DEA equipment still scattered from their hasty search, and saw something else. Something he had not paid attention to before. In the corner, covered with a tarp, a familiar shape. He walked over, pulled the tarp away, and felt hope surge for the first time since the crash. 2 missiles on launch rails. AGM-114 Hellfire missiles. Air-to-ground weapons, probably left over from some DEA interdiction operation years ago, forgotten when the base was abandoned. Stone joined him, saw what he was looking at, and shook his head slowly. "Captain, those missiles are designed to be launched from helicopters. We don't have a helicopter. We have a crashed wreck 400 meters from here." "I know. And even if we could get them to that wreck, the fire control system is dead. We'd have no way to aim, no way to launch." Those missiles might as well be paperweights. Hawk turned to Reaper. The missiles, can you hotwire them? Bypass the electronic safeties? Create a manual launch? Reaper blinked. Sir, that would be incredibly dangerous. The missiles could explode on the rail. The guidance system would be non-functional. We'd essentially be firing a rocket in the general direction of a target and hoping for the best. But could you do it? She looked at the missiles, at the helicopters circling outside, at her captain who was asking her to attempt the impossible. Theoretically. Maybe, if we had time and tools and a death wish. Stone, take one of these missiles back to the crash site. Reaper goes with you. Danny and I will stay here, keep the cartel busy. You've got 20 minutes to make this work. Captain, Stone started, but Hawk cut him off. That's an order. Those helicopters will tear us apart if we don't take them out. This is the only play we have. Stone looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Yes, sir. Come on, Reaper. Let's go do something stupid. They took one of the Hellfires, Reaper carrying her laptop and tools, Stone providing security, and slipped out the back of the hangar into the smoke and chaos of the compound. Hawk watched them go and prayed he had not just sent them to die. Danny appeared beside him, his arm hastily bandaged, rifle held ready. Sir, what do we do? We hold. Hawk checked his rifle. 2 magazines left, maybe 60 rounds total. We keep the cartel focused on us until Stone and Reaper can pull off a miracle. And if they can't, then we die fighting. But at least we die knowing we tried. Danny nodded slowly. His fear had not disappeared, but something else was there now too. Determination, acceptance, the understanding that sometimes there were things worth dying for. The two of them took positions at the hangar entrance, using the door frame for cover. Outside, the compound was chaos. The fuel depot still burned, black smoke towering into the sky. Cartel fighters moved in groups, searching buildings, calling to each other. And overhead, the helicopters circled, waiting for orders, waiting for a clear shot. Hawk settled his breathing, found his center, and prepared to buy Stone and Reaper the time they needed, even if it cost him everything. The first wave of cartel fighters came 10 minutes later, 20 men moving in a coordinated assault, suppressing fire from multiple angles. Hawk and Danny returned fire, controlled bursts, making each round count. The HK-416 kicked against Hawk's shoulder in a rhythm he knew better than his own heartbeat. Brass ejected. Targets fell. The mathematics of survival written in copper and lead. His last magazine. 30 rounds. He fired in bursts of 3, dropping 1 target per burst, the way he had been taught a lifetime ago. 10 bursts. 10 targets. The magazine ran dry, and he dropped it, loaded his final pistol magazine, knowing this was the end of the line. Danny was down to his sidearm too, a 9mm that seemed inadequate against the enemy they faced. They looked at each other across the hangar, both men understanding that this was likely their last stand. It's been an honor, sir, Danny said. The honor was mine, Cole. You did good today. Your family would be proud. And then the radio crackled. Hawk's radio, the one clipped to his vest. Doc's voice, strained but triumphant. Raptor 2-4, we have missile ready, targeting the lead helicopter. Stand by for launch. Hawk and Danny exchanged glances. Stone had done it. Somehow, impossibly, they had done it. Outside, one of the helicopters was making its gun run, nose dropping, cannon rotating to bear on the hangar. Hawk could see the pilot's face through the canopy glass, see the moment the man acquired his target. And then, from across the compound, a streak of smoke. The Hellfire missile launched from the wreckage of their Black Hawk, wobbling, clearly not flying the way it was designed to fly, but flying nonetheless. A 100-pound rocket motor pushing 20 pounds of high explosive at over 1,000 miles per hour. The Z-10 pilot saw it, tried to evade, banking hard right. But the missile's proximity fuse did not require a direct hit. It detonated 50 feet in front of the helicopter, and the fragmentation pattern caught the aircraft in its forward quarter. The cockpit glass shattered. The engine compartment erupted in smoke. The helicopter began to spin, losing altitude, and then it hit the ground 800 meters away in a fireball that sent debris flying like shrapnel. The second helicopter broke off immediately, climbing and turning, fleeing at maximum speed. The pilot had no interest in facing an enemy that could shoot down aircraft with impossible manual launches. On the ground, the cartel fighters stopped, frozen by what they had just witnessed. Their air support, their overwhelming advantage destroyed by a crew they had written off as dead. Hawk keyed his radio. Outstanding work, Doc. Stone, Reaper. Get back here now. We're consolidating position. Already moving, Captain. And sir? Stone's voice carried something that might have been amusement. That was the craziest thing I've ever seen work. Welcome to my world, Stone. They held the hangar for another 40 minutes. The cartel probed twice more, but without their helicopters and with their casualties mounting, their heart was not in it. Hawk could feel the momentum shifting. They were going to survive this. And then finally, the sound they had been waiting for. American helicopters. 3 Black Hawks coming in low and fast, bristling with weapons, carrying the quick reaction force that would extract them from this nightmare. The QRF secured this compound in 20 minutes. 60 special agents and Border Patrol tactical operators, overwhelming force that sent the surviving cartel fighters scattering into the desert. Hawk and his crew were surrounded by friendlies, medics checking their wounds, commanders demanding sit-reps. And in the center of it all stood a woman in tactical gear with Border Patrol insignia. Agent Sarah Mendez, 40-something, hard-eyed and competent. She looked at Hawk and his battered crew and shook her head in something like wonder. Captain Hawthorne, we received your mayday 90 minutes ago. Command was ready to write you off as KIA. How the hell are you alive? Hawk looked at his crew. Stone bleeding from a dozen small cuts but standing tall. Reaper, exhausted but clutching her laptop like it held the secrets of the universe. Danny, arm bandaged, looking like he had aged 10 years in one day. Doc and Novak, being treated by medics but giving thumbs up. Good people, Hawk said simply. I had good people with me. Agent Mendez gestured at the burning compound, the destroyed helicopter, the containers of drugs and weapons. And you did all this? 6 people against how many hostiles? Approximately 60. We estimate 30 to 40 casualties on their side. Mendez stared at him. Jesus Christ. Just doing our job, ma'am. She looked like she wanted to say something else, but a call came over her radio. She listened, her face darkening, then looked back at Hawk. Captain, we need to debrief you immediately. There are some serious questions about what happened here. Questions about how the cartel knew you were coming. About who might have compromised this operation. I have answers, Hawk said. In proof. Reaper? Reaper handed over her thumb drive. Everything you need is on here. Communications between the cartel and a DEA agent named Marcus Cordova. Financial transactions. The complete operational plan. Cordova sold us out. He's your mole. Mendez took the drive like it was a live grenade. If this is what you say it is, this is going to tear the agency apart. Better to tear it apart and rebuild it clean than let the rot spread. She nodded slowly. You'll all need to come with us. Medical evaluation, formal debriefing. This is going to take days. Understood, but ma'am, my crew, they're heroes. Whatever happens, whatever investigation follows, I want that on record. They saved my life. They saved each other. And they stopped enough fentanyl from hitting the streets to save thousands of American lives. That matters. It does, Captain. It absolutely does. The helicopters lifted off an hour later, carrying Hawk's crew away from FIREBASE SERPENT. Hawk sat in the cargo bay, strapped in, exhausted beyond measure, and watched the compound recede into the distance. Somewhere down there, Raul Vega had escaped. El Serpiente had slipped away into the desert, wounded and beaten, but alive. 18 years ago, Hawk had not pulled the trigger. Today, he had tried to correct that mistake, and failed again. But this time, he had saved his people. This time, no one under his command had died because of his hesitation. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was redemption. Or maybe it was just the first step on a longer road. Stone caught his eye across the cargo bay, gave him a tired nod. Hawk nodded back. Brothers, that's what they were. Brothers forged in fire. The helicopter banked toward home and Hawk closed his eyes just for a moment and allowed himself to believe they were going to be all right. The war was not over, but this battle at least they had won. The desert night fell like a curtain of black velvet studded with stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. Temperature that had scorched at 115 degrees during the day plummeted to 60 within 2 hours of sunset. Hawk huddled behind a boulder at their defensive perimeter, feeling the cold seep through his uniform, and understood that they were running out of time in ways that had nothing to do with ammunition or enemy numbers. Hypothermia killed in the desert as surely as heat stroke, and they had no cold weather gear, no shelter, no way to build a fire without advertising their position to every cartel fighter within 10 miles. Stone appeared beside him, moving silently despite his bulk, and handed Hawk an MRE pouch. Beef stew, cold, congealed into a paste that tasted like cardboard and regret. Hawk ate it anyway, forcing down calories his body needed to keep functioning. How's the ammo situation? Stone's voice was barely a whisper. M24OB down to 150 rounds, HK 416S averaging 4 magazines each. We've got maybe one more sustained engagement in us before we're throwing rocks. And the crew? Doc's holding up, shoulders bothering him from that broken rib, but he won't admit it. Reaper's exhausted but functional. Danny's scared but steady. Novak's head injury is getting worse. He's seeing double, fighting nausea. We need to get him to a hospital soon or we're going to lose him. Hawk digested this information along with the tasteless stew. 6 people, wounded, low on ammunition, surrounded by hostiles who had time and numbers on their side. The tactical situation was beyond dire. It was actively catastrophic. And yet they were still alive, still fighting, still refusing to quit. What about you? Hawk asked quietly. How are you holding up? Stone was silent for a long moment. His wife, Keisha, she was pregnant. Didn't tell anyone yet because it was early, only 8 weeks, but I knew. Could see it in her eyes when I left for this mission. And my boy, Marcus Jr., he ships out for basic training in 6 weeks, going to be infantry like his old man. Stone looked at the stars, his face unreadable in the darkness. I keep thinking about them, about whether I'll see them again, about whether my son is going to grow up without a father, whether this baby is going to be born and I'll never even meet them. You'll meet them. Hawk's voice was certain. We're getting out of this. Maybe. Stone's smile was sad. Or maybe this is where my story ends. And if it is, I want to make sure it means something. Want to make sure you all get out. Want my kids to know their father died protecting his brothers. That's a legacy I can live with. Or die with. Hawk wanted to argue, wanted to insist that they would all survive. But he had been a soldier long enough to know that sometimes the only honest thing you could offer was silence and presence. So he sat beside Stone, 2 warriors sharing the cold and the dark, and the understanding that came from facing death together. The radio on Hawk's belt crackled. Border Patrol's voice, distant and static-filled. Raptor 2-4, this is station, November 7. Be advised, we have your position confirmed via satellite. QRF is being assembled, but ETA is now approximately 90 minutes due to weather conditions moving in from the west. How copy? Hawk keyed the transmit button. Copy your traffic, 90 minutes. We can hold that long. But as he said it, he saw headlights in the distance. Multiple vehicles approaching from the east, and from the west, and the north. The cartel was mobilizing everything they had for one final push to wipe out the survivors before help could arrive. Stone saw it too. That's not a probe. That's an assault. They're coming with everything. Then we meet them with everything we have. Hawk gathered the crew. They assembled in the center of their defensive position. 6 people who looked like they had been through hell because they had. Doc's face was gray with pain. Reaper's hands shook from exhaustion and adrenaline withdrawal. Danny's eyes were too wide, showing too much white. Novak could barely stand without swaying. And Stone. Stone looked calm, resolved, like a man who had made peace with whatever came next. Listen up. Hawk kept his voice low but clear. QRF is 90 minutes out. Cartel is making their final push now. We're low on ammunition. We're wounded. We're outnumbered at least 10 to 1. Any realistic assessment says we should surrender and hope they take prisoners. He paused, looked each of them in the eye. But I didn't survive FIREBASE Serpent to surrender to the people who shot us down. Didn't watch Stone take out a helicopter with an impossible shot just to give up now. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to fight. We're going to hold this position. And we're going to make them pay for every inch of ground until help arrives. Questions? Danny raised a shaking hand. Sir, what if help doesn't arrive in time? Then we die fighting. But we die together as a crew, and we take as many of them with us as we can. That's all any soldier can ask for. Stone stepped forward. Captain, I have a suggestion. Tactical, not emotional. Hear me out. Go ahead. Their assault is going to come from 3 directions simultaneously. North, east, west. We don't have enough people to hold all 3 approaches effectively. We're spread too thin. Someone's going to break through. So what do you propose? I propose we abandon the south perimeter. Pull everyone to the north side, concentrate our fire, Create a killing field. Make them come at us from one direction where we can mass our firepower. That leaves our back exposed. It does, which is why I'll take the M240B and position on that ridge 800 meters south. I can see the entire battlefield from there. Anyone who tries to flank around behind you, I'll engage. I can buy you 20, maybe 30 minutes before they realize where I am and come for me. Hawk understood immediately what Stone was proposing. A one-man rear guard, a suicide position. Stone would be alone, exposed, with limited ammunition, facing an enemy that would eventually locate and overwhelm him. No, we stay together. Captain, with all respect, we don't have a choice. This is the only play that gives everyone else a chance. Doc stepped forward. Stone's right. Tactically, it's our best option. Morally, it's asking one man to die so 5 can live. But in war, sometimes that's the call you have to make. Reaper's voice was quiet but steady. The math works. 1 position instead of 4. Concentrated firepower instead of dispersed. If we're going to survive, this is how. Danny looked sick but nodded. I'll do whatever you tell me to do, sir. Hawk looked at Stone, this man who had been his right hand for a decade, and felt something break inside his chest. I can't order you to do this. You're not ordering me. I'm volunteering. And Captain, this is my choice, my decision. You taught me that leadership is about making hard calls. Well, this is mine. Let me make it. The weight of command had never felt heavier. Hawk understood that this was the moment, the choice that would define him. Accept Stone's sacrifice and give the others a chance, or refuse and probably lose everyone. He thought about Fallujah, about hesitation, about 4 Marines who had died because he had not acted when action was required. Not this time. This time he would make the hard call. All right, Hawk's voice was rough. You've got 20 minutes to get into position. After that, we start our fighting withdrawal to the north perimeter. You engage any flanking movement. When you're out of ammunition, you fall back to our position. Understood? Understood, sir. And Stone, Hawk gripped the man's shoulder. You come back. You hear me? Your son needs his father. Your wife needs her husband. That baby needs to meet you. So you do what you have to do, but then you come back. Stone smiled, and it was the saddest thing Hawk had ever seen. I'll do my best, Captain. Always have. He turned to the others. Doc, you're the best medic I've ever worked with. Keep everyone breathing. Reaper, you're brilliant. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. Danny, you're going to be a hell of a soldier someday. Novak, you're tougher than you think. And Captain, Hawk, he paused. Thank you for teaching me what leadership really means. It's been an honor. Before anyone could respond, Stone gathered the M240B, loaded his last belt of ammunition, 150 rounds that would have to be enough, and disappeared into the darkness. The silence he left behind was profound. Doc was the first to speak. We better make sure his sacrifice means something. They repositioned to the north perimeter, using rocks and the crashed Black Hawk's fuselage for cover, created interlocking fields of fire, distributed the remaining ammunition as evenly as possible, prepared for the assault they all knew was coming. 15 minutes later, the headlights resolved into vehicles, technical trucks with mounted weapons, panel vans disgorging armed men, at least 40 fighters, probably more, moving with the confidence of people who believed they had already won. Stone's voice crackled over the radio, calm, as if he were commenting on the weather. I count 43 hostiles approaching from the north, another 20 trying to flank east. And pause, 12 more coming around south, right into my engagement zone. I've got them. The M240B opened fire from Stone's position, the sound distant but unmistakable. Hawk could not see the ridge where Stone had positioned himself, but he could see the effect. The southern flanking element scattered, men diving for cover, the confident advance turning into chaos. And then the northern assault hit. 43 men with automatic weapons, firing as they advanced, using vehicles for mobile cover, professional and deadly. Hawk and his reduced crew met them with everything they had. The HK-416 in Hawk's hands became an extension of his will. Sight picture, breathe, squeeze, target down, next target, the mathematics of survival written in copper and lead. Beside him, Doc was firing with the precise economy of a man who understood that every round mattered. Reaper had commandeered one of the rifles from a fallen cartel fighter, doubling her firepower. Danny was holding the east flank alone, his earlier fear burned away by necessity, replaced by the mechanical efficiency of training taking over. The firefight was brutal, close range, personal. Hawk saw faces as men fell, saw the moment life left their eyes. This was not the antiseptic warfare of drones and missiles. This was the ancient brutality of men killing men, close enough to see the consequences. Stone's M240B continued to hammer from the south, firing in disciplined bursts, each burst precisely aimed. He was holding the flank alone exactly as he had promised. And then the eastern assault came. 20 cartel fighters coordinated with the northern push, hitting Danny's position with overwhelming force. The kid fought like a demon, his rifle barking constantly, but there were too many. They were going to break through. Reaper saw it happening. Without hesitation, without orders, she grabbed 2 fragmentation grenades, the last ones they had, and sprinted toward the eastern perimeter. "Reaper, no!" Hawk shouted, but she was already gone. She threw both grenades into the advancing mass of cartel fighters. The explosions were devastating at close range, bodies thrown like rag dolls, the assault broken by sheer violence. But one grenade had been too close. Reaper was thrown backwards by the blast, hit the ground hard, and did not move. Danny was there instantly, dragging her to cover, checking for wounds. "She's alive," he shouted, unconscious but alive. The northern assault was reforming, regrouping, preparing for another push. Hawk checked his rifle. Last magazine, 30 rounds. He looked at Doc. Doc showed his own rifle. Last magazine. They were out of time, out of ammunition, out of options. And Stone's M240B had gone silent. The quiet was more terrifying than the gunfire had been. "Stone, report." "Nothing." "Stone, come in." Static. Hawk felt his heart stop. No, not like this. Not after everything. Movement on the southern ridge. Figures climbing towards Stone's position. Flashlights. Voices shouting in Spanish. They had found him. And then, impossibly, the M240B opened fire again. Just a short burst. 5 rounds. But enough to tell Hawk that Stone was still fighting. Still alive. "Captain," Stone's voice over the radio, weak and distorted. "They're on me. Out of ammunition for the 240, switching to pistol. Probably won't make it back. Want you to know it's been an honor. Tell my son, tell him I love him. Tell him his father died protecting his brothers. Tell him that matters." "Stone, hold on. Help is coming." "Not for me, it isn't." Stone's voice was fading. "But that's okay. I made my choice. Just do me a favor. Make sure Keisha knows I was thinking about her at the end. Make sure my kids know their father loved them more than his own life. I promise." "Good. That's good." Stone's voice was barely audible now. "One more thing, Captain. Don't you dare hesitate. Not now. Not ever again. You hear me? You lead these people out of here. You get them home. That's an order from a staff sergeant to his captain." Stone laughed, weak and painful. "Probably insubordination. But someone had to tell you." The radio went silent, and Hawk knew with the certainty that came from a decade of friendship that Marcus Stonebridge was gone. For a moment, the world stopped. The grief was so profound it felt physical, a weight pressing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. But he could not stop, could not hesitate, because Stone had just given everything so that they could live. Doc appeared beside him, tears streaming down his face, but his voice was steady. "Captain, we need to move. Now. Use Stone's sacrifice. Don't let it be for nothing." Hawk nodded, pushed the grief down where it could not paralyze him, and took command. "Everyone up. We're making a fighting withdrawal to the crashed Black Hawk. Use it for hard cover. Conserve ammunition. Fire only when you have a clear shot. Move." They pulled back, carrying Reaper between them, laying down covering fire with their last ammunition. The cartel assault had been broken by Stone's sacrifice. The enemy was regrouping, but slowly, cautiously, having learned that these 6 Americans were far more dangerous than they looked. They reached the Black Hawk as full darkness settled over the desert, used the aircraft's fuselage as a bunker, and waited. 15 minutes. 30. The cartel probed twice more, but half-heartedly, like they were waiting for something. And then Hawk heard it, the sound that meant salvation, rotor blades, multiple helicopters, coming in fast and low. 3 Black Hawks appeared over the ridgeline, door guns blazing, suppressing the cartel positions with overwhelming firepower. The quick reaction force had arrived. Within 10 minutes, the area was secure. 60 federal agents and Border Patrol tactical operators flooded the crash site. Medics rushed to treat the wounded. Agent Mendez appeared, took one look at Hawk's crew, and immediately started coordinating medical evacuation. "Where's your sixth man?" she asked. "Your manifest showed 6 souls on board." Hawk looked toward the southern ridge where Stone had made his stand. "He's on that ridge, 800 meters south. He held the flank alone, saved us all. But he didn't make it." Mendez followed his gaze, then spoke into her radio. "I need a recovery team on the southern ridge. We have a fallen soldier. Handle with respect." 4 agents moved out, and Hawk watched them go, feeling empty. They would find Stone's body, would bring him home, would give him the honors he deserved. But it would not bring him back, would not let him meet his unborn child, would not let him watch his son graduate basic training. Doc appeared beside Hawk, his own face streaked with tears. He died a warrior's death, protecting his brothers. That's what he would have wanted. Doesn't make it hurt less. No, it doesn't. They stood together in the darkness, 2 soldiers who had lost a brother, and let themselves grieve for the man who had given everything so they could live. The medical evacuation helicopter arrived 30 minutes later. Reaper was loaded first, still unconscious, but stable. Novak went next, his head injury requiring immediate treatment. Danny climbed aboard, moving like a man in shock, the reality of combat finally catching up to him. Doc stayed with Hawk, both men refusing to leave until the recovery team returned with Stone. It took 2 hours. When they finally came down from the ridge, they carried a stretcher draped with an American flag. Stone's body, recovered with the dignity and respect due to a fallen warrior. Hawk and Doc stood at attention as the stretcher was loaded into the helicopter, saluted as the door closed, and only when the helicopter lifted off, carrying their brother on his final flight, did they allow themselves to board their own evacuation aircraft. The flight back to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base was silent. Hawk sat in the cargo bay, staring at nothing, replaying the last 24 hours frame by frame, looking for the moments where different choices might have led to different outcomes. But he knew with cold certainty that Stone's choice had been the right one, the only one that gave the rest of them a chance, and that knowing it was right did not make it hurt any less. Doc finally spoke, his voice rough. "You're going to blame yourself. I can see it already. Going to add this to Fallujah. Add Stone to the list of people you think you failed." Hawk said nothing. "Don't." Doc's voice was hard. "Stone made his choice. As a warrior, as a leader, as a man who understood that some things are worth dying for. You dishonor his sacrifice if you carry guilt for a decision he made freely. He died because I put him in that position. He died because 40 cartel fighters were trying to kill us, and he found a way to save us. That's not your failure. That's his heroism. And if you can't see the difference, if you can't honor what he did without making it about your guilt, then you learn nothing from FIREBASE Serpent." The words hit like physical blows. Hawk looked at Doc, saw the anger and grief warring in his face, and understood that Doc was right. Stone had not died because Hawk had failed. Stone had died because he had succeeded, had made the hard choice, had led even from a subordinate position, had shown them all what it meant to sacrifice for your brothers. That was not guilt. That was legacy. And the only way to honor that legacy was to make sure it meant something, to teach the next generation, to ensure that Stone's sacrifice saved not just 5 people in a desert, but countless others through the lessons learned and passed forward. "You're right," Hawk said quietly. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Just remember it. When the nightmares come, when the guilt tries to pull you down, remember that Stone chose this, and he chose it because he trusted you to lead the rest of us home. Don't betray that trust by drowning in guilt." "I won't, I promise." The helicopter touched down at Davis-Monthan as dawn broke over the Arizona desert. Hawk stepped out onto the tarmac, saw the gathering of officers and medical personnel, and understood that the hard part was just beginning. There would be debriefings, investigations, questions about what had happened at FIREBASE Serpent and why, medals and ceremonies and all the ritual ways the military processed trauma and loss. But first, there was a phone call he had to make, a promise to keep. He found a private office, borrowed a phone, and dialed the number Stone had made him memorize years ago, just in case. The phone rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered, thick with sleep. "Hello? Mrs. Stonebridge, Keisha. This is Captain Jack Hawthorne, Marcus's commanding officer." There was a long pause, and then, in a voice that already knew but needed to hear it anyway. "No, I'm so sorry. Marcus, he died in combat, saving his crew, saving us all. He was the bravest man I've ever known. And he asked me to tell you that he loved you, that he was thinking about you at the end, that he died protecting his brothers, and he wanted you to know that mattered to him. The sound that came through the phone was inhuman, grief in its rawest form. Hawk held the receiver, listening to Keisha Stonebridge's world shatter, and felt his own tears finally come. When she could speak again, her voice was broken but steady. Did he know about the baby? He knew. He told me. He was so happy, so proud. He said Hawk had to stop, gather himself. He said he wanted to meet them more than anything. I'm so sorry he won't get that chance. Tell me how he died. I need to know. So Hawk told her. Everything. The crash, the siege, the impossible choice. The way Stone had volunteered, had insisted, had made the hard call so others could live. The way he had held that ridge alone, facing impossible odds, buying time with his life. He died like he lived, Hawk finished. As a warrior, as a protector, as a man who put his brothers before himself. And because of him, 5 people came home alive. Because of him, I'm here to make this call instead of someone calling you about all 6 of us. Keisha was crying, but there was something else in her voice now. Something harder, stronger. My son, Marcus Jr., he worships his father. How do I tell him? Tell him the truth, that his father was a hero, that he made a choice to save his brothers, that he died with honor. And tell him, Hawk paused, his voice thick, tell him that I will help raise him, that I will teach him what his father taught me, that he will never lack for a father figure. I promise you that. Thank you, Keisha whispered. Thank you for bringing him home, even like this. The call ended. Hawk sat alone in the office as the sun rose higher, as the base came to life around him, and mourned the brother he had lost. But he also made a vow. Stone's death would not be in vain, would not be just another casualty in an endless war. It would be a legacy, a lesson, a guiding light for everyone who came after. That was how you honored the fallen, not with guilt, not with regret, but by making sure their sacrifice changed the world for the better. And Hawk would spend the rest of his life making sure Marcus Stonebridge's sacrifice meant everything. The interrogation room at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base was deliberately uncomfortable. Gray walls, fluorescent lights that hummed with a frequency designed to induce headaches, a metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs equally uncomfortable. Hawk had been sitting in one of those chairs for 6 hours, answering the same questions in slightly different configurations, watching men in suits take notes and exchange meaningful glances that meant nothing to him. The lead interrogator was FBI, Special Agent Carson, 50-something, with the kind of face that suggested he had seen every variation of human dishonesty and believed none of what he heard anymore. He sat across from Hawk with a folder open between them, photographs spread like tarot cards predicting a grim future. Captain Hawthorne, let me make sure I understand the sequence of events. You were shot down by cartel forces at FIREBASE SERPENT. You then infiltrated the compound, discovered 200 kilograms of fentanyl and military-grade weapons, engaged in a sustained firefight against approximately 60 hostiles, and manually launched a Hellfire missile to destroy an enemy helicopter. Does that about cover it? That's accurate. And during this engagement, you claim to have discovered evidence of DEA corruption. Specifically, you allege that Agent Marcus Cordova provided classified information to cartel operatives. I don't allege anything. The evidence is on the thumb drive Corporal Reyes provided. Communications logs, financial transfers, flight schedules. Cordova sold us out. Agent Carson tapped the folder. We've reviewed the data. It's compelling. But there are questions about chain of custody, about how this information was obtained. Defense attorneys will have a field day arguing illegal search and seizure. We were shot down and fighting for our lives. I wasn't thinking about warrant requirements, which is exactly the problem. Carson leaned back, studying Hawk with eyes that missed nothing. Captain, between you and me off the record, I believe you. I think Cordova is dirty. I think he got Marines killed for money. But believing something and proving it in court are very different things. What you've given us is enough to open an investigation. Whether it's enough to secure a conviction, that remains to be seen. Hawk felt exhaustion pressing down on him like a physical weight. 24 hours since the crash. 24 hours of debriefings and medical exams and questions that seemed designed to trap him into contradicting himself. His body ached. His shoulder throbbed where he had wrenched it during the crash. His head pounded from dehydration and stress and the fluorescent lights that never seemed to dim. Am I under investigation? Everyone involved in this incident is under investigation. Standard procedure when there are allegations of corruption within federal agencies. You'll be placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. Your crew as well. How long? Weeks, maybe months. These things take time. Hawk thought about Stone, about Doc, about the rest of his crew scattered across the base in their own interrogation rooms, answering their own versions of the same questions. Good soldiers being treated like criminals because they had survived when they should have died. And Cordova? What happens to him? He's been placed on administrative leave as well, pending investigation. So he's free, walking around, while we're confined to base. That's correct. Hawk felt something cold settle in his chest. The system was broken. A corrupt agent who had sold out his own people was getting the same treatment as the people who had nearly died because of his betrayal. It was wrong on a level that made Hawk want to put his fist through the wall. But he was a soldier. He understood chains of command. He understood that sometimes justice moves slowly, grinding through bureaucratic machinery that cared more about procedure than truth. So he nodded, understood. Is there anything else? Not for now. You're dismissed, Captain. Stay on base. Don't discuss this case with anyone outside your immediate chain of command. We'll be in touch. Hawk stood, his body protesting the movement, and walked out of the interrogation room into the corridor beyond. The air seemed fresher out here, less oppressive, though that might have been psychological rather than literal. Doc was waiting for him, leaning against the wall with the patient stillness of a man who had learned to wait through 2 decades of military service. He looked tired, bruised around the eyes, but whole. How'd it go? Same as yours, probably. Lots of questions. Not many answers. You heard we're on administrative leave? Yeah. Doc pushed off the wall, fell into step beside Hawk as they walked toward the exit. Stone's pissed. Thinks we're being railroaded. Reaper's worried they're going to bury the evidence. Danny's just confused. And Novak? Medical discharge. Head injury was worse than we thought. Traumatic brain injury with long-term effects. He's being processed out. Hawk felt that news like a blow. Novak, the kid who had survived 2 IED blasts in Afghanistan and earned a nickname that should have protected him, was being thrown away by the same system that had put him in harm's way. It was wrong. All of it was wrong. They stepped out into Arizona sunlight that felt like a physical assault after hours under fluorescent lights. The base sprawled before them, familiar and alien at once. Home and prison. What do we do now? Doc asked quietly. We wait. We trust the system. We let the investigators do their jobs. Doc looked at him sidelong. You believe that? Hawk thought about Cordova walking free. About Raul Vega somewhere out there. Wounded but alive, planning his next move. About 200 kilograms of fentanyl that had been destroyed but represented just a tiny fraction of the poison flooding across the border every day. No, but it's all we've got. 3 days later, the knock came at 2 a.m. Hawk was not asleep. Sleep had become something that happened to other people, not to him. He lay on his bunk in the bachelor officer's quarters staring at the ceiling, replaying FIREBASE SERPENT frame by frame, looking for the moments where different choices might have led to different outcomes. The knock came again, insistent, urgent. Hawk rolled out of bed, pulled on pants and a t-shirt, and opened the door. Stone stood in the corridor, still in civilian clothes, his face grim. We need to talk, not here. They walked to the parking lot, climbed into Stone's pickup truck, and drove off base into the desert night. Neither man spoke until they were miles from Davis-Monthan, surrounded by darkness and empty land. Stone pulled off the highway onto a dirt road, killed the engine, and turned to face Hawk. I got a call 2 hours ago. Friend of mine, still on active duty, works in intelligence. He said the investigation into Cordova is being shut down. What? Political pressure. Apparently Cordova has friends in high places. Friends who don't want their names associated with a corruption scandal. The evidence we provided is being labeled unreliable, obtained under duress, inadmissible. Hawk felt rage building, cold and controlled. They're burying it. They're burying it. And there's more. My friend said there's been chatter, encrypted communications between known cartel assets and someone inside the U.S. They think Raul Vega is planning something. Something big. And they think Cordova is helping him. When? Soon. Maybe days. My friend couldn't get details, but he said if something happens, If Americans die because the investigation was shut down, there's going to be hell to pay. But by then it'll be too late. They sat in silence, two soldiers who had spent their careers following orders and trusting the system, coming to terms with the fact that the system had failed them. "What are you thinking?" Stone asked quietly. "I'm thinking about 4 Marines who died in Fallujah because I hesitated, about how I've carried that guilt for 18 years, about how I swore I'd never let it happen again. Captain, we're on administrative leave. We have no authority, no jurisdiction. If we do something outside channels, we're done. Court-martial, prison, everything we've built, gone." "I know, but you're going to do it anyway." Hawk looked at Stone, this man who had stood beside him for a decade, who had faced death with him and never wavered. "I can't let it happen again, Stone. I can't sit here while Cordova and Vega plan whatever they're planning, while more people die. I just can't." Stone was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "What do you need?" "Information. Cordova's location, his communications, his contacts, everything." "I can get that. My friend owes me favors. But Hawk, if we do this, there's no coming back. We'll be operating outside the law. Vigilantes, everything we are, everything we've sworn to uphold, we'll be betraying it. Or maybe we'll be honoring it. The oath we took was to protect and defend, not to stand by while corrupt officials sell out their own people for profit." Stone's teeth showed white in the darkness. "All right then, let's go to war." The intelligence came in pieces over the next 48 hours. Cordova had a safe house in Nogales, Arizona, 20 miles from the Mexican border. He'd been seen meeting with known cartel associates. His bank accounts, the ones the official investigators had not looked at closely enough, showed deposits from offshore accounts linked to the Vega organization. And there was something else. Intercepted communications suggested a shipment was coming through. Not drugs this time, something worse. The intelligence was fragmented, incomplete, but the word that kept appearing was radiological. Dirty bomb components. Material that could turn an American city into an uninhabitable wasteland. Hawk assembled his crew in a warehouse on the outskirts of Tucson, a place that Doc's cousin owned and asked no questions about. Stone, Doc, Reaper, Danny, even Novak, despite his medical discharge, despite the headaches and the blurred vision and the doctor's orders to rest. They gathered in the dim light of the warehouse. 6 soldiers who had been through hell together and were preparing to go back. Hawk stood before them, feeling the weight of what he was about to ask. "Everything I'm about to say is off the record. Unofficial. Illegal, probably. If any of you want to walk away, do it now. No judgment, no questions." No one moved. "Cordova is dirty. We all know it. And he's helping Raul Vega smuggle something across the border. Something that could kill thousands. The official investigation has been shut down. No one is stopping them." "So we stopped them," Stone said. "Simple as that." "It's not simple. We have no authority, no backup. If we do this and we're wrong, we go to prison. If we're right but can't prove it, we still go to prison. This is a suicide mission from a career standpoint." Danny spoke up, his voice steady. "Sir, with all due respect, my cousin died from fentanyl that came across that border. If there's a chance to stop more poison from killing more families, I don't care about my career." Reaper nodded. "My father was murdered by cartel hitmen. This is personal for all of us." Doc cracked his knuckles. "I'm too old to start worrying about my pension now." Novak, pale and shaking slightly, straightened. "I might not be able to shoot straight anymore, but I can still drive. I can still help." Hawk looked at them, these people who had become family, and felt something loosen in his chest. "All right, then here's the plan." The safe house in Nogales was a nondescript ranch-style home on a quiet street where neighbors minded their own business. Cordova had chosen well. Close to the border for quick escapes into Mexico. Isolated enough that surveillance was difficult. The kind of place where illegal business could be conducted without attracting attention. Hawk and his crew watched the house for 12 hours from a position 2 blocks away. They saw Cordova come and go, saw 2 other men, Mexican nationals according to Reaper's facial recognition software, arrive in a black SUV with Sonora plates, saw cases being unloaded and carried inside. "This is it," Reaper said quietly, watching through a spotting scope. "This is the meat." "How long?" "They've been inside for 2 hours. Could be planning, could be waiting for something. Hard to say." Stone checked his rifle. "We go in soft, fast. Secure Cordova and anyone else inside. Get answers. And if they don't want to give answers, Danny asked, then we make them want to, Doc said flatly. They moved at 11 p.m., 6 shadows flowing through Nogales streets. No radios, no communications that could be intercepted. Just hand signals and years of training that made them move as one organism. The house had minimal security, a standard door lock that Reaper picked in under a minute. No alarm system. Cordova was arrogant, confident in his corruption, certain that no one would dare come for him. He was wrong. They entered through the back door, flowing into the kitchen in a tactical stack. Hawk led, rifle up, finger on the trigger. The house was quiet, lights on in the living room, voices speaking Spanish, casual, unconcerned. Hawk edged to the doorway, looked around the corner. 3 men in the living room. Cordova, recognizable from his FBI photo, sitting in an armchair. 2 cartel soldiers on the couch, both armed, pistols visible in shoulder holsters. And on the coffee table between them, a metal case, open, containing something that made Hawk's blood run cold. Small cylinders, lead-lined, with Cyrillic lettering on the side and radiation warning symbols. Cesium-137, stolen radiological material, the core component of a dirty bomb. Hawk did not hesitate, did not wait, did not think about jurisdiction or legality or anything except stopping this. Federal agents, he shouted, which was a lie but a useful one. On the ground now. The room erupted. The cartel soldiers went for their guns. Cordova dove behind the couch. Hawk fired twice, center mass on the nearest target. The man went down. Stone fired from behind Hawk, dropping the second soldier before he could clear leather. Cordova tried to run, bolting for the front door. Doc clotheslined him, a perfect tackle that sent the corrupt agent crashing to the floor. Within seconds, they had him zip-tied, face down, Stone's boot on his back. The firefight had lasted perhaps 5 seconds. 2 hostiles dead, 1 prisoner secured, the radiological material untouched. Danny and Reaper cleared the rest of the house. Empty. Just the 3 of them and a case full of nightmare fuel. Hawk stood over Cordova, looking down at a man who wore a badge and a uniform and had betrayed everything those symbols represented. "Where's Vega?" Cordova said nothing. Stone increased pressure with his boot. Cordova grunted in pain. "The captain asked you a question." "You're all dead," Cordova gasped. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, no idea what's coming." Hawk knelt down, grabbed Cordova by the hair, forced him to look up. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A coward who sold out his brothers for money. A traitor who helped smuggle radiological weapons into the United States. And I know what's coming. I'm coming. For Vega. For everyone involved in this. And I'm not stopping until every single one of you is in the ground or in a cell." "He can't be touched," Cordova spat. "He's got protection. Political protection, military protection. You go after him, you'll disappear. All of you. Then we'll take him with us." Reaper was photographing the cesium, documenting serial numbers, building a case that could not be ignored or buried. Doc was searching Cordova's pockets, pulling out phones and keys and a wallet stuffed with cash. Stone found something else. A burner phone in Cordova's jacket. He powered it on, scrolled through recent calls, and his face went hard. "Hawk, you need to see this." The last call on the phone was to a number with a Mexico country code. And the last text message, sent 3 hours ago, was simple and chilling. "Delivery confirmed. Target acquired. Execute Phoenix Protocol tomorrow 1400 hours. Phoenix Protocol. Hawk had heard that phrase before. In briefings. In intelligence reports. It was a cartel contingency plan. If a major operation was compromised, if leadership was threatened, they would strike hard and fast at a symbolic target. A school, a mall, a government building, somewhere that would generate maximum casualties and maximum terror. "What's the target?" Hawk demanded. Cordova smiled, blood on his teeth. "You'll find out tomorrow. 1400 hours, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Stone kicked him in the ribs, hard enough to hurt but not to break. "Talk or I'll make you talk. You can't make me do anything. I have rights, I have lawyers, I have—" The rest of his words were lost as Doc shoved a rag in his mouth. "We don't have time for this. Hawk, we need to get this information to someone who can act on it. FBI, Border Patrol, someone." "Who? Who do we trust?" Cordova had friends in the agency, friends who shut down the investigation. How do we know who's clean? Reaper looked up from the cesium case. I might have an idea. Agent Mendez, the Border Patrol officer who extracted us from FIREBASE SERPENT. She seems straight, and she has the authority to mobilize a response. Hawk thought about Mendez, about the way she had looked at the carnage at FIREBASE SERPENT with disgust and determination, about how she had taken their evidence seriously when others were ready to dismiss it. Call her. Tell her we have Cordova. Tell her about the cesium. Tell her about Phoenix Protocol, and tell her we need her help. Reaper made the call. Mendez answered on the second ring, her voice sharp with suspicion that turned to shock as Reaper explained the situation. The conversation lasted 5 minutes. When it ended, Reaper looked at Hawk. She's coming, with a tactical team, ETA 30 minutes. She said to secure the site and don't let Cordova out of our sight. Did she say anything else? Yeah. She said if this is real, if we really stopped a dirty bomb attack, we're heroes. And if it's not, we're going to prison for the rest of our lives. Hawk looked at the cesium on the table, at Cordova bleeding on the floor, at his crew standing ready despite knowing they had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Then we better be right. Mendez arrived with 20 agents, vehicles blocking both ends of the street, agents in tactical gear surrounding the house. She walked in like she owned the place, took one look at the cesium, and her face went white. Jesus Christ. She turned to Hawk. Is this what I think it is? Cesium 137, enough to contaminate several city blocks. Cordova was facilitating the transfer. We have his phone, evidence of communication with cartel operatives, and intelligence about an attack planned for tomorrow at 1400 hours. Mendez pulled out her radio, started barking orders. I need a hazmat team here now. I need the Joint Terrorism Task Force on the line, and I need every available agent mobilized. We're going threat level red. She turned back to Hawk. Where's Vega? We don't know. Cordova won't talk. But his phone might have location data, might give us something. Reaper already had her laptop out, connecting to Cordova's phone, running software that would strip every byte of data from the device. 3 minutes later, she looked up. Got something. GPS history. Cordova met with someone at a warehouse in Tucson 2 days ago. Industrial district, abandoned furniture factory. If I had to guess, that's where Vega is staging. Mendez made a decision. Captain Hawthorne, you and your crew are officially deputized as federal agents for the duration of this emergency. You're coming with us. Ma'am, we're on administrative leave. We have no authority. You have my authority. You're the only people who have seen Vega face to face. You're the only ones who survived FIREBASE SERPENT. I need you. So you can accept my deputization, or you can stay here and wonder if you could have made a difference. Your choice. Hawk looked at his crew, saw determination, saw readiness, saw soldiers preparing for one more mission. We're in. The warehouse sat on the edge of Tucson's industrial district, a hulking structure of corrugated metal and broken windows. 3 loading docks, a main entrance chained shut, graffiti on the walls, and trash scattered around the perimeter. The kind of place that blended into urban decay and attracted no attention. Mendez had brought 40 agents. Hawk and his crew were embedded with the tactical response team, geared up in borrowed body armor and carrying weapons that felt familiar in their hands. The assault plan was simple. 3 teams, Alpha through the main entrance, Bravo through the loading docks, Charlie through the roof access, simultaneous breach, overwhelming force. Take Vega alive if possible, neutralize any threats, secure any weapons or materials. Hawk was with Alpha team, Stone beside him. They stacked up at the main entrance, waiting for the signal, feeling the familiar pre-combat tension that made time stretch and hearts pound. Mendez's voice crackled over the radio. All teams stand by. 3, 2, 1, execute. The shaped charge on the door detonated with a sharp crack. The door blew inward. Alpha team flowed through the opening like water, rifles up, moving with practiced efficiency. The warehouse interior was vast and empty, concrete floor stained with oil and rust. Steel support beams rising to a ceiling 30 feet overhead, and in the center a cluster of vehicles. 3 panel vans, 2 pickup trucks with covered beds. Movement, figures scattering, muzzle flashes in the darkness. Contact, someone shouted, and the warehouse became a war zone. Hawk dropped to cover behind a support beam, returned fire at targets he could barely see. Beside him, Stone was shooting in controlled bursts, his rifle barking sharp and loud in the enclosed space. Danny and Doc were somewhere to his right, Reaper to his left, everyone moving, shooting, coordinating without words because they had done this before and knew how to fight as one. The cartel soldiers were good, trained, disciplined. They used cover effectively, concentrated their fire, tried to pin down the federal agents. But they were outnumbered and outgunned, facing professionals who had come prepared for war. The firefight lasted 3 minutes. When it ended, 6 cartel soldiers were down. The rest had surrendered or fled. And in the back of one of the vans, agents found what they were looking for. Explosives, military grade, enough to level a building. And maps, detailed maps of a location in Phoenix, a federal courthouse, where tomorrow at 1400 hours, a naturalization ceremony was scheduled. 300 new American citizens taking their oath, families watching, children present. Phoenix Protocol, a dirty bomb at a courthouse full of civilians, a strike designed to generate maximum terror and maximum casualties. But Raul Vega was not there. Mendez stood in the center of the warehouse, radio pressed to her ear, coordinating with a dozen agencies, and her face was grim when she lowered the radio. Vega's in the wind. We've got alerts at every border crossing, every airport, every bus station. But he's a professional. He knows how to disappear. Hawk felt frustration and rage building. They had stopped the attack, saved hundreds of lives. But the man responsible, the man who had orchestrated all of it, had escaped again. 18 years. 18 years since Fallujah. And once again, Raul Vega had slipped through his fingers. Stone appeared beside him. We got the weapons. We got the cesium. We saved lives. That's a win, Captain. It doesn't feel like a win because you wanted to face him, wanted closure. I get it, but sometimes we don't get closure. Sometimes we just get survival, and sometimes that has to be enough. Hawk knew Stone was right, knew that what they had accomplished mattered. But the old guilt, the old doubt still whispered in his mind, what if? What if he had taken that shot in Fallujah? What if he had not hesitated? What if? Doc joined them, his face thoughtful. You know what I think? I think Vega's done. His network is compromised. His materials are seized. His inside man is arrested. He's got no resources, no protection, no options. He's not a threat anymore. He's just a man running for his life. Maybe, or maybe he's planning something else, something worse. Then we'll be ready. Stone's voice was certain. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. The sun was rising over Tucson when they finally left the warehouse. Hawk stood in the parking lot watching dawn paint the sky in shades of orange and gold and felt exhaustion settling into his bones. They had won. The attack had been stopped. The cesium was secured. Cordova was in custody. Hundreds of lives had been saved. But Raul Vega was still out there, still free, still carrying the guilt of Fallujah forward into an uncertain future. Mendez approached, her tactical gear dirty and bloodstained. Captain Hawthorne, I need to debrief you and your crew, but first I wanted to say thank you. What you did tonight, stopping this attack, it saved lives, American lives. Whatever happens next, whatever investigation follows, remember that. Will there be an investigation? Probably. You operated outside your authority. Technically, you broke about a dozen laws, but you also stopped a terrorist attack that would have killed hundreds. So I'm going to recommend commendations, medals, and that any charges be dropped. And our administrative leave? Lifted. As of now, you're all back on active duty, assuming you want to be. Hawk thought about retirement, about that cabin in Montana, about a life without missions and responsibilities and the weight of command, and realized he was not ready. Not yet. There was still work to do, still people to protect, still a debt to repay. We want to be good, because I have a feeling we're going to need you. She walked away, leaving Hawk standing in the dawn with his crew around him. Stone, Doc, Reaper, Danny, Novak, 6 people who had been through hell and come out the other side. Stone clapped him on the shoulder. You did good, Captain. We all did. Hawk looked at the rising sun, felt its warmth on his face, and allowed himself a moment of peace. The war was not over. Vega was still out there. The corruption they had exposed would have consequences that rippled outward. The future was uncertain and probably dangerous. But for now, in this moment, they had won. They had saved lives. They had done what soldiers do. They had stood when others would have run. They had fought when others would have surrendered. They had refused to accept that evil could win. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. 6 months after FIREBASE SERPENT, Hawk stood in front of a classroom at Fort Rucker, Alabama, looking at 40 faces that reminded him of himself 20 years ago. Young, eager, terrified they would not measure up. The Army Aviation School had offered him the instructor position 3 times before he finally accepted. Not because he wanted to teach, but because he understood that passing knowledge to the next generation was the only way to ensure that the sacrifices of his generation meant something. The classroom was standard military issue. Rows of desks, a projector screen showing the unit crest, windows overlooking the flight line where helicopters practiced patterns against an Alabama sky that was bluer than it had any right to be. Hawk stood at the front in his dress uniform, feeling the weight of the new insignia on his collar. Lieutenant Colonel, the promotion had come through last month, along with a chest full of medals that felt heavier than metal had any right to feel. Leadership Under Fire, that was the name of this course, the one every aspiring pilot had to take before they could command their own crews. The one that separated those who could make decisions when people's lives hung in the balance from those who froze when the bullets started flying. Hawk looked at the students and began, 23 years ago, I was sitting where you are now, fresh out of flight school, thinking I knew everything, thinking I was invincible. And then I deployed to Iraq, and I learned that knowing how to fly a helicopter and knowing how to lead under combat conditions are 2 very different things. He clicked the remote. The screen behind him lit up with an image. Fallujah, smoke rising from buildings, a Black Hawk in profile against a burning sky. I made a mistake in Fallujah, a mistake that cost 4 Marines their lives. I had a target in my sights, a suspected insurgent, and I hesitated. I didn't pull the trigger. And 10 seconds later, that suspect ambushed a Marine patrol from the building I should have engaged. The classroom was silent. These were not civilians who needed to be convinced that war was real. These were soldiers who had signed up knowing they might die. But hearing it from someone who had lived it, who carried the scars, that hit differently. For 18 years, I carried that guilt. Told myself I was a failure. Told myself I didn't deserve to lead. And then 6 months ago, I got a second chance. I got shot down with my crew in hostile territory. We were outnumbered, outgunned, cut off from support, and I had to make a choice. I could let that old guilt paralyze me, or I could lead my people through hell and bring them home. He clicked again. FIREBASE Serpent, the crashed Black Hawk, the destroyed cartel compound. We chose to fight, we chose to trust each other, and we survived. Not because I was perfect, not because I had all the answers, but because when it mattered, I made decisions and my crew trusted me to lead them. Another click, a photograph of his crew, Stone, Doc, Reaper, Danny, Novak, all of them in dress uniforms at the medal ceremony 2 months ago. That's what leadership is. Not perfection, not fearlessness. It's about making the hard calls when the easy answer is to give up. It's about standing with your people when everyone else has run. It's about understanding that you will make mistakes, you will have regrets, but you cannot let those mistakes define you. A hand went up in the back. A young lieutenant, maybe 24, with the kind of face that suggested he had never been punched. Sir, how do you deal with the guilt when you know your decisions got people killed? Hawk met the lieutenant's eyes. You don't deal with it, you carry it. You let it make you better. You honor the people you lost by making sure their deaths meant something, by leading the next generation so well that fewer people have to die. That's all any of us can do. The lecture continued for another hour. Tactics, decision-making frameworks, case studies from combat operations spanning 3 decades. But the core message remained the same. Leadership was not about being the smartest or the strongest. It was about being there when your people needed you most. When the class ended and the students filed out, one remained. A young captain, 30 years old, with the weathered look of someone who had seen combat. He approached Hawk with the cautious respect of a junior officer addressing a superior. Sir, I wanted to thank you for your honesty. Most instructors don't talk about their failures. They only talk about their victories. Hawk gathered his notes, slid them into a folder. If I only taught you about victories, I'd be lying. War is mostly failure and adaptation. Anyone who tells you different is selling something. Can I ask you something personal, sir? Go ahead. The man who hesitated to shoot in Fallujah, the one who ambushed the Marines, do you know what happened to him? Hawk thought about Raul Vega, about the last intelligence reports that had crossed his desk, about a man who had built a cartel empire and then watched it burn when FIREBASE Serpent fell. About someone who was now a fugitive, hunted by both American and Mexican law enforcement, living in the shadows of a world that had moved on without him. I know he's no longer a threat. His organization is dismantled. His support network is gone. He's just a man running from consequences. And eventually everyone stops running. Do you think about him? Every day. But not the way I used to. I used to think about what would have happened if I'd killed him. Now I think about all the lives we saved by stopping his operation. Sometimes you can't change the past. You can only do better in the present. The captain nodded slowly. Thank you, sir. That helps. After he left, Hawk stood alone in the empty classroom, looking at the images still displayed on the screen. His crew, his brothers and sisters. The people who had pulled him out of the darkness of 18-year-old guilt and shown him that redemption was possible. His phone buzzed, a text from Stone. You still coming to the thing? The thing. Stone's way of referring to the memorial dedication. Marcus Stonebridge had been dead for 6 months, but his memory lived on in ways that would have embarrassed the hell out of him while he was alive. The Marcus Stonebridge Combat Excellence Award. The Stonebridge Protocol for Helicopter Crew Survivability. And now a memorial at Arlington National Cemetery. A simple stone marker in a field of thousands, but one that his son could visit and understand that his father had mattered. Hawk texted back, wouldn't miss it. See you there. Arlington National Cemetery in late autumn was a study in organized solemnity. Endless rows of white headstones marching across green hills, flags at every grave, the tomb of the unknown soldier visible in the distance, guards maintaining their eternal vigil. This was where heroes came to rest, where the nation remembered those who had given everything. Hawk arrived early, as he always did, and walked among the graves. He knew some of these names, had served with some of them, had stood at their funerals and promised their families that their sacrifice meant something. Keeping those promises was what got him out of bed in the morning. Stone's grave was in Section 60, where the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan had filled rows with fresh markers. The headstone was simple. Staff Sergeant Marcus Stonebridge, United States Army, dates of birth and death, in a single line. He died so others could live. The dedication ceremony was scheduled for 1400 hours. By 1330, people were gathering. Hawk stood apart, watching. Stone's widow Keisha arrived with their son, Marcus Jr., who wore his army dress uniform with the bearing of a young man who understood what sacrifice meant. Doc was there, along with Reaper and Danny. Novak sat in a wheelchair, his traumatic brain injury having progressed to the point where standing for long periods was difficult, but he had insisted on coming. And there were others, soldiers Stone had trained, men and women who had served with him across 2 decades. A delegation from the Marine Corps honoring one of their own who had transferred to the Army but never stopped being a Marine. Even Agent Mendez had come, representing the Border Patrol and federal agencies that had worked the FIREBASE Serpent case. At exactly 1400 hours, an Army chaplain stood before the assembled crowd and began the dedication ceremony. He spoke of service and sacrifice, of a man who had put his brothers before himself, of a warrior who had stood his ground when others would have run. And then it was Hawk's turn to speak. He walked to the podium that had been set up beside the grave, looked out at the faces watching him, and felt the weight of the moment. These were Stone's people, his family, his legacy. What Hawk said here would matter. Marcus Stonebridge was my brother, not by blood, but by choice, by the bond that forms when you face death together and refuse to quit. 10 years ago, when I met Stone, I was broken. I was carrying guilt from a mistake I'd made in Iraq, a mistake that had cost Marines their lives. And I thought I was done, thought I didn't deserve to lead anymore. Stone saw through that. He didn't judge me, didn't preach at me. He just stood beside me day after day, mission after mission. And slowly, by his example, he showed me that leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. 6 months ago, we got shot down together. We were surrounded by enemies who wanted us dead. We had no support, no backup, no good options. And Stone made a choice. He stayed behind to cover our withdrawal. He held off an enemy force alone so that the rest of us could complete the mission and get out alive. That was who Marcus Stonebridge was. A man who understood that some things are worth dying for. Not glory, not recognition, but the lives of your brothers and sisters, the mission, the people depending on you. Hawk paused, feeling his throat tighten. Around him, the cemetery was silent except for the wind moving through the trees. Stone had a son, Marcus Jr., and before he died, Stone told me to make sure his son knew how to be a warrior. Not because he wanted his son to fight, but because he wanted his son to be able to protect what he loved. Marcus Jr., if you're listening, your father was the best man I ever served with. He was brave, loyal, and absolutely uncompromising when it came to protecting his people. And he was so proud of you. He talked about you all the time, talked about how you were going to be a better soldier than he ever was. I can't replace your father. No one can. But I can promise you this. I will honor his memory by training the next generation of soldiers to be as good as he was. By teaching them that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing your job when you're terrified. That leadership isn't about being the hero, it's about making sure your people get home. Your father gave his life so that others could live. That's the highest calling a soldier can answer. And his legacy will live on in every pilot I train, every crew I lead, every mission where someone makes the hard choice because they learned from Marcus Stonebridge that some things are worth standing your ground for. Rest easy, brother. Your watch is over. We'll take it from here. The ceremony concluded with a 21-gun salute, 7 rifles, 3 volleys each, the sound echoing across Arlington. Taps played by a single bugler, the mournful notes carrying across the field of stones. The American flag that had covered Stone's coffin during his funeral was presented to Keisha, folded into a perfect triangle, a nation's gratitude for her husband's sacrifice. Afterwards, people lingered, sharing stories, remembering. Hawk found himself standing with Stone's son, both men looking at the fresh headstone. "Sir," Marcus Jr. said quietly, "my father used to tell me about you, said you were the best pilot he'd ever flown with, said you never left anyone behind. Your father was a better man than I'll ever be. He didn't think so. He said you carried a burden that would have broken most people, but you kept going, kept leading, kept protecting your crew. He said that's what real strength looks like." Hawk felt something loosen in his chest. All these months, he had been thinking about his failures, about Fallujah, about not taking the shot that might have prevented everything that followed. But maybe Stone had been right. Maybe strength was not about never failing. Maybe it was about getting back up after you fell. Your father taught me that, taught all of us. And now it's our job to pass that knowledge forward. "Sir, I ship out to Afghanistan next month. First deployment. I'm scared." Hawk looked at this young man who carried his father's name and his father's determination. "Good. Fear means you understand the stakes. But remember what your father would tell you. Do your job. Trust your training. Take care of your people. That's all any of us can do." Marcus Jr. nodded slowly. If I need advice, can I call you?" "Anytime, day or night. You're Stone's son. That makes you family." They shook hands, and Hawk saw tears in the young man's eyes. Saw the same determination that Stone had carried. Saw a warrior being forged in the same fires that had tempered his father. The sun was setting over Arlington when Hawk finally left. He drove back toward Fort Rucker, but halfway there he took a detour. Drove south into the Alabama countryside, down roads that became smaller and more remote, until he reached a place he had been avoiding for months. A small town called Riverside, population 3,000. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone and strangers were noticed. Hawk parked on Main Street and walked to a cemetery much smaller than Arlington. No endless rows of white stones, just a modest graveyard behind a Baptist church, surrounded by live oaks draped with Spanish moss. He found the grave he was looking for in the back corner. A simple marker. Carlos Santos, beloved brother and son, gone too soon. Doc's brother, dead from a fentanyl overdose 3 years ago. Another casualty of the poison that flowed across the border every day, killing Americans who never set foot on a battlefield. Hawk stood before the grave, feeling the weight of what they had accomplished at FIREBASE SERPENT. 200 kilograms of fentanyl destroyed. A dirty bomb plot stopped. Hundreds of lives saved, maybe thousands. But it had not saved Carlos. And it would not save the next person who bought pills from a dealer who cared only about profit, not about the destruction they caused. The war was not over. Would probably never be over, but at least they had won a battle. At least they had made a difference. He heard footsteps behind him. Turned to find Doc standing there, hands in his pockets, looking at his brother's grave with the quiet sadness of someone who had learned to carry loss without being crushed by it. How'd you know I'd be here? Followed you. Figured you might want company. They stood together in the fading light, two soldiers who had lost people they loved and learned to keep fighting anyway. You think it matters? Doc asked quietly. What we did at FIREBASE Serpent? Stopping that shipment? Does it actually change anything? Hawk thought about the courthouse in Phoenix, about the 300 people who had taken their citizenship oath 2 months ago, completely unaware that they had been hours away from dying in a radiological attack. About families who still had their loved ones because a crew of soldiers had refused to quit. Yeah, it matters. Not because we solved everything, but because we saved lives. And every life we save is a victory, even if the war keeps going. Doc nodded slowly. Carlos would have liked that. He always said the only way to fight evil was one day at a time, one person at a time. Not grand gestures, just consistent resistance. Your brother was smarter than both of us. He really was. They left the cemetery as darkness fell, drove back to Fort Rucker together, and went their separate ways with the understanding that came from shared grief and shared purpose. 1 year after FIREBASE Serpent, Hawk received an envelope marked personal and confidential. Inside was a letter on Department of Justice letterhead, signed by the Attorney General himself. The letter informed him that Marcus Cordova had been convicted on 17 counts, including conspiracy, corruption, providing material support to terrorists, and accessory to murder. Sentence: life in federal prison without possibility of parole. The evidence gathered by Corporal Angela Reyes had been instrumental in securing the conviction. Also, the letter continued, we thought you should know that Raul Vega was apprehended 3 weeks ago in Guatemala. He is currently awaiting extradition to the United States, where he will face charges of terrorism, murder, and drug trafficking. His organization has been completely dismantled. Hawk read the letter twice, then set it down and stared out the window of his office at Fort Rucker. After 18 years, it was over. The boy he had not shot in Fallujah had been caught. The man who had built an empire of poison had been stopped. Justice, delayed but not denied, had finally arrived. He should have felt relief, vindication, closure. Instead, he felt empty, because none of it brought back the 4 Marines who had died in Fallujah. None of it erased the 18 years of guilt. None of it changed the past. But maybe that was the point. Maybe closure was not about erasing the past. Maybe it was about accepting it and moving forward anyway. His phone rang. Stone's son, Marcus Jr., calling from Afghanistan. Sir, I wanted to tell you, we completed our first combat mission today. Extracted a wounded soldier under fire. Everyone made it out. And sir, I kept thinking about what you told me, what my father would do, and it worked. Hawk smiled, felt warmth spreading through his chest. That's good, Marcus. That's real good. Your father would be proud. Sir, I was thinking, when I get back stateside, maybe I could come to Fort Rucker. Take your leadership course. Learn how to be the kind of leader my father was. I'd like that. We'd all like that. After the call ended, Hawk sat in the silence of his office and understood something he should have understood years ago. Redemption was not a destination. It was a journey. It was teaching the next generation. It was standing with your brothers when the world fell apart. It was refusing to let the past define your future. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a photograph. His old crew from Fallujah, Jenkins, Rodriguez, Patterson, O'Brien, 4 faces that had haunted him for 18 years. He looked at them now and felt something different than guilt. He felt gratitude, because their sacrifice had taught him the cost of hesitation, had driven him to become a better leader, had made him the man who could save his crew at FIREBASE Serpent. I'm sorry I didn't save you, he said quietly to the photograph. But I swear I've used the lessons you taught me. I've made sure other people live because I learned from my mistake. And I'll keep teaching, keep leading, keep making sure your deaths meant something. He placed the photograph back in the drawer, but this time he did not close it and lock it away. He left it visible. A reminder not of failure but of responsibility. 5 years after FIREBASE Serpent, Colonel Jack Hawthorne stood on a stage at Fort Rucker's graduation ceremony, watching 200 newly minted Army aviators receive their wings. Among them was Marcus Stonebridge Jr., now a captain himself, ready to command his own crew. Hawk had been promoted again, made commandant of the aviation school, the youngest commandant in the school's history. It was a desk job, mostly. Less flying, more administration, but it also meant he could shape how an entire generation of pilots was trained, could ensure that the lessons of FIREBASE Serpent, the lessons Stone had died to teach, would be passed forward. The ceremony concluded with the traditional overflight, 3 Black Hawks in formation, flying low over the parade field. The missing man formation, 3 helicopters holding position while a 4th pulled up and away, climbing into the sky, representing those who had fallen. Hawk watched that 4th helicopter climb and thought about Stone, about Doc, who had retired and now ran a nonprofit helping veterans deal with addiction, about Reaper, who worked for the NSA hunting down cartel networks, about Danny, now a major, training the next generation of door gunners, about Novak, medically retired but working as a civilian contractor, designing helicopter safety systems. They had all moved on, all found new missions, all carried FIREBASE Serpent with them like a badge of honor. The crowd dispersed. Families congratulated their newly graduated pilots. Hawk made his rounds, shaking hands, offering advice, being the public face of the institution. And then Marcus Jr. approached, newly pinned captain's bars gleaming on his collar. "Sir, I wanted to thank you for everything, for honoring my father, for teaching me, for showing me what leadership really means." Hawk clasped the young man's shoulder. "You honored your father by becoming the kind of officer he would be proud of. That's all any of us can do. Carry forward the legacy of those who came before." "Sir, I was wondering, my first command assignment is in 6 months. I'm nervous. What if I make the wrong call? What if people die because of my decisions?" Hawk thought about Fallujah, about FIREBASE Serpent, about all the decisions he had made over 25 years in uniform, some right, some wrong, all of them part of the man he had become. Then you'll carry it, you'll learn from it, and you'll make sure their sacrifice means something by being better next time. That's what your father did. That's what all of us do. We're not perfect, Marcus. We're just present. And sometimes that's enough. They talked for another hour about tactics and leadership in the weight of command. And when Marcus Jr. finally left, walking toward his family with his head high and his future bright, Hawk felt something he had not felt in a long time. Peace, not the absence of struggle, not the end of responsibility, but the understanding that he had done his job, had honored those who fell, had passed the torch to the next generation. That night, alone in his quarters, Hawk pulled out a bottle of whiskey, Maker's Mark, Stone's favorite. He poured 2 glasses, set one in front of Stone's photograph, and raised the other. To the fallen, to the brothers and sisters who gave everything, to the mission that never ends, and to the knowledge that what we do matters, even when the results take years to see. He drank, felt the burn, and smiled, because he had learned something that took 18 years and one desperate mission to understand. Redemption was not about erasing your mistakes. It was about using them to become someone who could save others from making the same ones. And in the end, that was all any soldier could ask for. Not perfection, not glory, just the knowledge that when it mattered, when lives hung in the balance, they had stood their ground and done their job. That was enough. That was everything. 10 years after FIREBASE Serpent, Colonel Jack Hawthorne retired from the Army at the age of 52. There was a ceremony, speeches about his service, presentations of plaques and flags, and all the ritual objects that the military used to mark transitions. But the moment that mattered came afterward, in the parking lot, where his old crew had gathered one final time. Doc, gray at the temples now, but still carrying himself like a warrior. Reaper, harder and colder from her work in intelligence, but still fierce when it mattered. Danny, now a lieutenant colonel himself, preparing to take over as deputy commandant. Even Novak, in his wheelchair, but grinning like this was just another mission. And in spirit, Stone, always Stone, the ghost at every gathering, the brother who had given everything so the rest could live. They did not say much. Soldiers rarely did when emotions ran deep. They just stood together in the parking lot, 6 people who had faced hell and refused to break, and understood that the bond they had forged could never be severed. Finally, Doc broke the silence. "So what now, old man? Really going to buy that cabin in Montana?" Hawk smiled. "Maybe, or maybe I'll stick around, teach at the community college, work with veteran groups. There's always more to do." "Can't stay away," Reaper said with amusement. "Once a soldier, always a soldier." Something like that. They embraced, one by one, brothers and sisters saying goodbye, knowing it was not really goodbye. They would see each other again, at reunions, at memorials, at the moments that mattered. As Hawk drove away from Fort Rucker for the last time, he looked in the rearview mirror and saw them standing there. His crew, his family, the people who had pulled him out of darkness and shown him that redemption was possible. And he understood that FIREBASE Serpent had not been an ending. It had been a beginning. The moment when 6 people had chosen to stand when they could have run, to fight when they could have surrendered, to refuse to accept that evil could win. That choice had changed everything, had saved hundreds of lives, had destroyed a cartel network, had shown a new generation what leadership really meant. And it had freed Hawk from 18 years of guilt, not by erasing the past, but by proving that the past did not have to define the future. The highway stretched before him, empty and full of promise. Somewhere ahead was that cabin in Montana, peace and quiet and days without responsibility. But Hawk suspected he would not stay there long. There was always more work to do, always another generation to teach, always another mission. Because that was what soldiers did. They stood watch. They protected those who could not protect themselves. They refused to quit, even when quitting would be easier. And sometimes when the circumstances aligned and the team was right and the cause was just, they achieved something that mattered, something that would ripple forward through time, touching lives they would never meet, making the world just a little bit safer for those who came after. That was the legacy of FIREBASE Serpent. Not the firefights or the medals or the headlines, but the simple knowledge that when it mattered most, 6 people had refused to accept defeat. And in the end, that refusal had made all the difference. The sun set behind him as Hawk drove north, toward Montana and whatever came next. And if you listened carefully, if you knew what to listen for, you could almost hear the sound of rotor blades. The thump, thump, thump of a Black Hawk in flight. The sound of warriors going home. The mission was complete. The watch was over. But the legacy would endure forever. As the storyteller behind this mission, I need to share something that haunts me. When I researched Captain Hawthorne's crew, I discovered Staff Sergeant Stone's widow still visits Arlington every month. His son, now a major, flies the same Black Hawks his father died protecting. That legacy, one man's choice to stand alone so 5 could live, that's what separates stories from truth. Question for you veterans out there. Have you ever had to make Stone's choice? Lead knowing someone might not come home? Drop your thoughts below. Your stories matter. And if this one hit home, there are more warriors waiting to have their sacrifice remembered. Stay for the next mission.